who is it in any company right now? Who are you a fan of their work? Who do you like to watch for enjoyment?
Well, the New Japan guys that I enjoy, I think the sleeper guy there, there's a lot of really good talents. I mean, Tanahashi is hurt right now, but he's really good. Okada is 28 years old, and he would be the face of my franchise if I was the booker there. Age, skill set, he's really, really good. Got a great look, and a super polite kid. Really a big fan. I really enjoyed meeting him when I went over there to broadcast Wrestle Kingdom 9. So he's really, really good. I like AJ Styles. I think AJ Styles right now may be the best worker to come through WWE since Shawn Michaels was in the locker room. I really love AJ's work and his mindset, and he's the kind of guy that, as a former booker, you and I could both say, you're never going to have any problems with AJ. He's not going to drink. He's not going to be a druggie. He's not going to do anything stupid. If he did, I'd be shocked. He's a family man, fundamentally, so he can work with anybody. He could be a great heel. He can be a great babyface. How do you get better than that? So I think AJ Styles is the WWE's top guy right now as far as in-ring skills, and I love his work. I think one of the underrated guys that I kind of like, Corny, is, and I just started really tuning into him because I wasn't crazy about his work in TNA, is Jay Lethal. I think Jay Lethal's a really, really good wrestler hand. I think he's a good hand. If I had a territory, I could sure as hell find a spot for Jay Lethal.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm glad you mentioned his name because for a while, and I'll say this, and it's not a knock on the company, for a while, Ring of Honor had pretty much a lock on everybody that I enjoyed watching as a fan. And now it's spread out a little bit, and that's not knocking them. That's just saying there's some great talent that's come up. We talked about Alpha and Revival. I like them, obviously, but Jay Lethal, I'm proud to say I had a pretty big hand in signing to come to Ring of Honor originally back in 2011, I believe it was, because I'd worked with him in TNA, and I saw not only is he a great in-ring performer, and he can talk, and he looks good, and he can work, but he's the kind of guy that you want in your locker room as an employee. He's the kind of guy that does PR appearances with sponsors and always has a smile on his face and it gets there on time. And he's not going to do anything stupid outside the ring. He doesn't have any bad habits. He's the guy that you want to build around. There were other people at the time that the fans may have wanted to see a little bit more, but you couldn't say the same things about them as far as being model employees. I've been a huge fan of Adam Coles, who I think is just tremendously talented and has been since he was like 19 years old, which was maybe all of 5 or 6 years ago. Maybe. I don't even know if he's that old now. I've always said the Briscoes were one of my favorite tag teams, but go ahead.
Jay Lethal and Jay Briscoe have a match in the main event this Friday night. I don't know when this airs, but on Friday night, the Ring of Honor pay-per-view, and I'm going to buy the pay-per-view because I'm invested in the FITE, F-I-T-E TV app, and we carry the pay-per-view. I want to support my app, obviously, because it's a free app, by the way, folks, FITE. But nonetheless, I think it'll be a hell of a wrestling match. I think it'll be a lot of old school stuff. I think the guys will sell. I think they'll isolate a body part. I think they'll tell a story that I can easily follow and process. So I think that's going to be a hell of a match. And those are the two kind of guys. They're hungry guys. They're at the top of their game. I love the fact that guys that some people may have said, well, you guys are never going to headline a pay-per-view. And now I just expect those two guys to tear the damn house down.
I think they will. Every time they go out with that intention. And with the Briscoes, sometimes it's been to the detriment of their bodies, at least their faces. Although I tell Jay and Mark this both to their face. I don't know if you could do much more damage to either one of those faces. They look like a mile of bad country road, but it's because they've given their all since they were teenagers to the business. Yeah. And there's another guy that used to be in Ring of Honor, and I mentioned Dolph Ziggler, by the way, on your show, and I'm a fan of his. I think he's the second coming of Kurt Hennig. I think sometimes he's been put in a position where he has to try a little bit too hard because of his lack of booking support. He's many times stumbled over bad booking in the dark. What do they expect in some of these cases when the fans learn, whether in storyline or not on television, that the authority, that the McMahon family, that the WWE as an entity, when the fans learn that they're behind a guy
their natural inclination is to rebel because from Mr. McMahon in the late 90s for almost 20 years, the promotion, the people running the promotion have been portrayed and placed in the role of heels.
Right.
And that's, can you think of another time in pro wrestling history where a promotion not only was categorized, but willingly was categorized as the heels? It goes against every logic. And Vince McMahon was a once-in-a-lifetime performer.
You're really high on Vince as a heel. I
loved it. Yeah. I think he was a once-in-a-lifetime performer and was tailor-made to be a wrestling heel. I mean, his whole makeup and everything he did. But once you've done that, nobody can follow it. And after 18 years or whatever it is, it starts to get a little old.
Yeah.
And I think there's a reason now that they're finding out why every wrestling promoter in every territory and every company always wanted themselves and their company to be portrayed as fair, as honest, as baby faces, as fan-friendly, trying to help the baby faces get a fair shot, not help them partisanly, but try to help them get a fair shot against those evil heels, because the heat went on the heels. And now also, in a lot of cases, since people know that there is some manipulation and choreography and predetermination, et cetera, behind the scenes, that the wrestlers more now than ever before are not saying words that they came up with. They're not even using a name they came up with. They might not even be using a personality they came up with until they get to the upper echelon and they've got that stroke. So in a lot of cases, the people are going to rebel against it, and they're going to blame the promotion when a heel says bad things because he's being told to say it. That's never been thought that way by the fans in wrestling before, and it's an interesting conundrum. How do they babyface the company?
Well, the other thing about that, and those are all good points, I think, that to make Roman Reigns the defiant, anti-establishment babyface that they have positioned him to hopefully be at some point in time, it also he becomes a trailer hitch to Stone Cold Steve Austin, who was the most defiant, the guy that defined that role, and Vince defined the role of the authority amazingly, as we both have said. Vince waited all his life to be able to have the opportunity and the right timing, the right creative to be a wrestling character.
Dr. Jerry Graham finally came out in him in his later years.
And hey, look, here's the deal. I waited years to be I wanted to be a broadcaster. I lived my dream, and I don't have an issue with Vince being a heel. He was good at it. And I would have an issue if he weren't good at it, like I would myself if I weren't a decent announcer where I could keep my job. But the bottom line of that is that I think maybe, as you mentioned, maybe this casting has run its course. Maybe it's time for the authority, whoever the authority is going to be a fan favorite, fan friendly. And if you do that, by the way, you get a whole new set of storylines you can write. Correct?
Yeah, exactly.
You got more pages to play with.
Well, from Commissioner Bob Armstrong and Smoky Mountain Wrestling, they're the ultimate authority figure for the promotion, in my opinion.
Bill Watts. He was the best babyface authority figure because once you cross the line, as you know, because we had the great run with the Last Stampede, with the Midnight Express, and that great program that people look at this thing's money nowadays and how money is. Everything's inflated. I think WWE's gate at WrestleMania, somebody said, was $17 million the live gate. And they have 1.8 million subscribers to the WWE Network, which is phenomenal. And congratulations to them. That was a vision that many of us had years ago when we started buying all these libraries up, that maybe someday we'll have our own channel. Yeah. Then it was going to be like the Food Network on a regular cable. Now, with all the advent of digital, they built their own thing. So I think it's pretty cool. They ain't got to split that money with the cable companies on the pay-per-view. So the money all comes home. So I'm just wondering. I'm thinking maybe it's time to go another direction with that thing, and a strong babyface authority figure might be timely. I don't know.
Doesn't even have to be babyface. Just impartial. Just make sure that the people know that the promotion is willing to give everybody a fair shot in what happens in the ring. That way the heat's on the heel, the glory's on the baby face, the promotion is not swaying it in one way or another. It might be something to try for a while.
It's online, worldofwrestling.com. Your opinion of Ahmed Johnson?
Great googly moogly. Ahmed Johnson.
Any opportunity I get today to have you do a little black for me. We had Ernie Ladd before. We're making a ton of money up here.
I can do some more Ernie Ladd. Let me tell you something. I'm the big cat Ernie Ladd. I'm 6'9". I weigh 325 pounds, and I covers the ground I walks on. I'm big enough to step on toes and keep on walking. Or if he's going to give you a finish, Ernie would say, "Now I tell you what you do. You shine him up a little bit, and then you get some heat on him. You're going to waltz him across Texas. You're going to make him sell like he's going to the electric chair. You're going to give him his comeback to the locker room." Or he told Darso one time, "Fat Darso, come over here, sit under the learning tree." Ernie was fucking great. Ernie was a classic interview of all time. Ahmed Johnson, so much less so. Ahmed was a great big looking guy. It was kind of stiff in the ring, but you could not understand a word that came out of his mouth. And some way or another, I don't know where it came from. I think it was a commercial or whatever. That's why I said that. Because every time he'd be on TV and start to talk, the guys sitting around the monitor would go, "Great googly moogly," because they couldn't understand a word he was fucking saying.
I believe in 1975, Bobby Heenan was managing Nick Bockwinkel in an AWA title match against Vern Gagne, and they did some kind of false finish where Bobby was involved, and some guy up in the stands jumped up and pulled out a gun and apparently used the guy's shoulder in front of him as like a gun rest to steady it. And all of a sudden the guy feels a hand on his shoulder and suddenly a gun goes off. They permanently damaged the guy's hearing. The guy fired 5 shots and hit like 5 different people at ringside. And Bobby dove under the ring and fucking, chaos. And the guy got away. They never caught him. So it's happened. I mean, Don Bass used to tell me stories how when Maul Bass was managing him and Ron as a brother team back in like the Boot Heel of Missouri and shit like that, they used to get shot at when they try to leave town from some of the spot shows. But anyway, the incident in New Orleans was after they had blinded Dog with the Freebird hair cream, of course, and they couldn't prove that it was intentional. Hayes claimed it was an accident. Mid-South was investigating. Dog was blinded, and Watts paid him. He gave him a check for $500 a week, and the fans were sending him in money because he cut the promo that he couldn't. He was about to have his daughter, and he'd never see her because he'd been blinded. So the fans were sending in like another $500 or so a week as contributions to Dog, and that was basically for Dog to stay in his apartment, not go outside, so people couldn't see that he could see. And then they bring him to New Orleans to shoot the angle where they're going to the Superdome with him and Hayes in the dog collar match, where he didn't have to be able to see because he was chained neck to neck with the fucking Hayes, and he'd be able to smell him, and he couldn't get away from him, blah, blah, blah. So they've got Dog in the corner of the baby faces that night, apparently that, we're going to fight the fucking Freebirds in his, and defend his honor, and they wipe out the baby faces, and there's Dog sitting there in the chair at ringside in New Orleans. And if you ever went to a Mid-South show there, they had bicycle rack barricades that were at least 12 to 15 feet out from the ring that said New Orleans Police Barricade, do not cross, because they had had so many riots and problems. Tony Zane, as an underneath job guy, went out to be part of a pull-apart one night and got stabbed by one of the fans hitting the ring. They'd had so many problems, they put these bicycle racks way far out and had that police barricade do not cross sign on them. Well, anyway, Michael Hayes, the master pantomimist, there's Gordy and there's Roberts and there's Hayes in the ring, and Hayes looks down and points at the junkyard Dog. And the people are going crazy because Dog's sitting there with his cane and his goggles, his Ray Charles glasses, and turning his head to one side and the other like he hears the people, but what's the matter? Right? I don't know what's wrong. And they're going to get the Dog, and this guy comes over the rail and gets right next to Dog and pulls a fucking pistol out of his pocket and says, "Don't worry, Dog, I got him," and points the gun straight at the Freebirds. And Dog told me the story himself. Personally, he said he was conflicted as to what to do because he could disarm the guy right there and save the Freebirds' lives, but then he would have showed the people that he could see. And if he showed the people he could see, then Bill Watts would kill him. So just as it was like the old your money or your life to Jack Benny, I'm thinking, as the dog took the beat to think about it, the cops were there and tackled the motherfucker just in time, and the Freebirds didn't get shot. But that was the level of belief that they had, because not only of these guys' performances, but also because of the way that it was presented by the promotion, because of the way that the matches were conducted at the time. You could lose yourself and believe that to the extent that you wanted to kill these motherfuckers. And whether it be Ron Wright or the Freebirds or Nick Bockwinkel and Bobby Heenan or whoever the fuck, it was not by any means isolated incidents.
This goddamn inconsiderate weasel. I was going down to do Burt Prentice's TV show, and me and Scott Hudson doing commentary, right? Well, Burt calls me one day and says, well, Jim, they're starting that TNA thing up, because he does in Nashville, They're starting that TNA thing up, and the TNA announcers are going to be here at TV. They want to do some practice. Well, I thought he was asking me to step back. I said, oh, sure, Burt, no problem. That's your main gig. I'm just doing this for a lark, so, I'll stay home. No. Burt, excuse me, I want you to do my TV. I just want you to know they're going to be in the back of the building practicing. Why are you telling me that? Well, one of them's Ed Ferrara. I said, oh, well, Burt, I'm going to have to fucking punch Ed Ferrara. He said, well, I knew there was heat, and I'm wondering if you could not fucking beat him up, because, I said, all right, Burt, I love you. You're great. Been nice to me. That's your main gig. I won't hit him. But we go down there. Now, I never promised him that I wouldn't tell Ed Ferrara what I thought of him. And I don't think very fucking much of him. For one thing, he was sucking Vince Russo's cock all those goddamn years. He fucked Vince McMahon. Well, he didn't really fuck Vince McMahon. He just left with the guy that fucked Vince McMahon. But also, he's a goddamn embarrassment to the fucking business. And besides that, the main thing was Jim Ross. So we're there, and about 40 guys in the back, and I'm Dusty Rhodes. I hadn't seen in ages. Talking to Dusty, hugged his neck. Talking to Ronnie Gossett's there, and just a bunch of people I know. And in walks this fucking lame-ass goddamn prick with fucking dreadlocks. He looked like a white Bob Marley with a big fucking sand ass. One of those fucking things you punch, they kind of bobble, big. And if I can talk about a big ass, it's big. and I saw him, and it's like, fuck. And he looks at me and he smiles. Last time I'd seen him was when I was in Connecticut, and we were all riding together, Actually, he was carrying Vince Russo's papers. Vince Russo was attempting to write, and I was attempting not to fucking cut my throat being around Vince Russo. So he comes up to me with his fucking hand out. So I walked up to him and I said, hi, Ed. And this is not verbatim because I said a lot of words real quick. But I said, I just want to tell you what a fucking miserable fucking piece of shit you are, you goddamn no good cocksucker, for fucking making fun of Jim Ross's Bell's palsy. Now I will digress here. Here's a fucking guy who's given 30 years of his life to the business, Jim Ross, who is the best announcer, maybe asterisk Gordon Soley, but who's the best announcer now of modern times, who is a workaholic, who gives his life to the business, who loves the business, and here this little fucking prick comes along from writing Duckman or whatever the fuck he did in California and took 2 wrestling classes at Slammer's Wrestling Gym and thinks he deserves a goddamn spot in the wrestling business and goes on national television and makes fun of a guy's he wasn't doing fat jokes. He wasn't doing goddamn bad hair jokes. He wasn't doing ugly jokes. He was making fun of a goddamn disability, a disease, a fucking paralysis of this guy's face that almost cost him his career, and he goes on television and makes fun of it. He's the most disreputable, miserable fucking piece of shit human being that's ever breathed air, in my opinion. And I felt someone should tell him so. So I said, you fucking miserable piece of shit, for making fun of Jim Ross's Bell's palsy, I want to tell you that you're a goddamn cocksucker. Fuck you, you fucking miserable asshole. And he's like, oh, really? I said, yeah, really. I said, Jim Ross has more talent in his little finger than you got in your whole stinking body. It's a goddamn shame you ever got in the fucking wrestling business to begin with. And fuck you in the ass. And he's like, oh, really? Well, I said I wouldn't hit him, but I didn't say I wouldn't spit on him, so hot too, and I spit in his fucking eye. And I said, now, the parking lot's 15 feet that way, you little cocksucker. You want to do anything about it? I don't know that I can whip him, but I was willing to try, whereas he didn't even have the goddamn balls. If you took Ed Ferrara's fucking nuts and you fucking threw them into a goddamn drinking straw, they'd look like a kernel of corn rolling into a storm drain. He's a goddamn cowardly, miserable fucking prick. He had the chance to fucking defend himself. He had the chance to fight me, and he wouldn't do it. Not because I'm goddamn King Kong or Godzilla, because he's a ballless, nutless, cowardly, yellow-bellied fucking prick. And I spit in his fucking face, and I asked him to go outside, and then people started coming over, and he wiped his face off, and he said, I've got too much respect for all the people here. I said, you don't have any goddamn respect, you fucking ass lick. That's why we're having this conversation. Fuck you. And he fucking went off in the back of the building, and I never saw him again. I did the television show. He fucking played with whoever's dick he was playing with that night, and I haven't seen him again. But I felt like somebody had to tell him, if you fuck with a friend of mine, I learned this from my mother and my father and a lot of people I've been around that I respect. If you fuck with a friend of mine, then you're fucking with me. It wasn't about somebody didn't do a job for me, or somebody didn't pay me back this money, or somebody didn't fucking give me interview time, or any wrestling pissy ass bullshit. He made fun of a person who I respect and who's been a friend to me. He made fun of their fucking disease, their disability that almost cost them their career, and I think he should be run over by a goddamn 18-wheeler in the fucking street. And fuck him. I'll tell you one thing, that fucking Ferrara, real quick. The goddamn miscarriage thing. Did I tell you that last time?
I don't remember.
Real quickly, Terry Runnels has a goddamn miscarriage. And I went up to Ed Ferrara. I said, you fucking idiot. I said, what was that all about? Well, it would happen on Dallas or whatever. I said, yeah, shit. They don't look at it like a TV show. They don't look at it like characters. They believe in these guys. They know it's a work now, but still they believe that this guy really is this guy. Ric Flair is Ric Flair, blah, blah, blah. I said, a miscarriage is going to leave a bad taste in the people's mouth that it's ever happened to. The people who know wrestling is a work are going to say, well, that's in bad taste. And the people who don't know wrestling is a work are still going to say, oh, that's kind of uncomfortable. And it didn't sell any tickets or any pay-per-views or draw any ratings. It was just worthless. I said, I would personally punch you in the face, Ed. This was before we had...
I think you did talk about this.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'd punch you in the face, you know, if it had happened to my wife, just because it's needless.
Right.
They got to understand, if you haven't been a performer, it's not writing word for word and laying everything out. You got to go out and feel it. You got to play to the crowd and be yourself. And you got to let the guys do that. You got to show them how to do it. You got to show them how to feel the people, and then you got to let them. And for somebody who's never been in that position, it's very hard for them to understand how to do that. Pause.
Slater was a tough son of a gun, and everybody knows the story with Sting, and I like Sting, and I don't mean to embarrass him publicly, but if you don't know it, I'll tell it to you.
I've heard the story, but not a very good description of the story. What the hell happened?
Basically what happened, Slater and Dark Journey were a couple in the UWF, and Sting was an innocent victim in this because Slater and Dark Journey broke up, and so Slater wasn't about to give her a ride to the town, but she was still on the card, so some way she asked poor Sting, hey, can I ride with you? And they come in together, and somebody went over in the heel locker room and told Slater, hey, Dark Journey just came in with Sting, and Slater got mad, and at the time you didn't do this, busted across the building into the babyface locker room and fucking... basically grabbed Sting and gave him the fucking flush thing. What he punched him out and flushed his head in the toilet a few times, and nobody stopped him, including Sting or anybody else, because what the fuck with Dick Slater. But I'm sure Gary was there because he was managing. Yes, he was managing Sawyer and Muta and Dragon Master, who was Kendo Nagasaki, I believe, in a previous incarnation. Buzz was nuts, as we've talked about, I think, on the program before a number of times. And if he was no selling, they were probably hitting him as hard as they could, and it still didn't register. He used to run his own head into the ring post as hard as he could till I could hear the thud across the ring, just so people would believe it, which probably accounts for some of his personal life behavior. But the biggest thing, obviously, that night was Sting's injury, because that had been planned, and I was on the booking committee at the time with Flair, and Kevin Sullivan and I were
charged with putting the TVs together and the paperwork and et cetera every week. And we were building to, obviously, the Horsemen had been baby faces. And Ole being a babyface was a stretch, but Flair's friends, since he was a babyface, had returned, and he had aligned himself with Sting so they could get even with Gary Hart and his men, and he'd run Terry Funk off, and now he's going to get even with the rest of them. And that happened on this show, and at the same time, earlier in the night, they had turned on Sting, and Ole was a brilliant promo there, where basically they had told him, no, there's going to be no world title for you. Flair's our guy. He's going to be the world champion. And Sting was not cool with that, and they turned on him, beat the shit out of him. And then in the main event, the cage match, after Gary Hart's men were dispatched, the Horsemen were standing tall, and Sting was going to hit the fucking cage, and he was going to try to climb in and get fucking Flair and the Horsemen, and we were building to the title change in Greensboro, I believe it was, at the pay-per-view a few weeks later, where Flair would put the belt on Sting. And Doug Dillinger, the security guard, had been Crockett. He was a Charlotte cop and had been security for Crockett Promotions that had been inherited like a slave on an old plantation by TBS.
You know what? Doug Dillinger sounds like such a WWE wrestling name right now.
Actually, I'm surprised they didn't use that. But Doug Dillinger, it was D-E-L-L instead of D-I-L-L. But anyway, I digress. Doug and his crack security force pulled Sting off the fucking cage, pulled him, and he dropped and landed on his leg and tore his ACL. Right there in front of God and everybody on national TV. And I saw Sting limping, but we didn't fully understand. And then by the time he got back to the back, we knew he was fucked. And that's when Flair said, well, because originally I actually had a car and was driving to the TV taping the next night after that show. But Flair said, stay over. We got to have a meeting in the morning. We'll fly to wherever we were going, Houston from Corpus Christi or whatever. We'll figure out what we're going to do. Well, so then I turn my car in, I get a hotel room, I stay overnight. I'm going to have to fly, which I didn't like even then. I get to the airport the next morning, and Flair said, well, instead of having a meeting, let's just wait and see how bad the doctor says it is. And ended up, Sting was out for like 6 months or more, and they did much as when Magnum had his car wreck in October of 86, Dusty needed a top babyface, and he put Nikita in the top spot, Nikita Koloff, to gain revenge, uphold the honor of Magnum TA, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And it worked like a charm. Well, in this case, it didn't really work like a charm, but Flair plugged Luger in the spot, who was the number 2 babyface at that time. That's where the world title got off track, because he had promised he was going to drop it to Sting, Flair had. And he didn't want to drop it to Luger, because then that would take the bloom off the rose of anointing Sting when Sting was ready. So Luger got rushed into the match, but they couldn't switch the belt. So they got derailed there, and it took, I guess that was February of 1990. It took until the following summer, I believe it was, before they finally got everything lined back up to put the belt on Sting. And by that time, Turner Broadcasting's ownership had pretty much put a nail in the coffin of the company. It didn't matter who was champion at that point. For the next 4 years were like the dark ages. And then, then Eric Bischoff tripped on a good idea that he saw in Japan and talked him into opening up the checkbook, and they had 2 years of business. And then they fucking fell in the toilet so bad it made 1991 and 92 look good. The concept was cool when it was first done. Jerry Lawler and Terry Funk did it in 1981. They were having a hot main event program in all the cities in the territory. And Terry was going to Japan for a month, and so they came up with the idea that Terry did the interview. Lawler, you got the people of Memphis on your side. You've got the referee on your side. You got the promoters on your side. And Terry challenged Lawler to a fight in the Coliseum with nobody there, no referee, no fans, no officials, nobody, just the two of them to settle the score. And they had a heck of a fight in an empty Mid-South Coliseum, 12,000 seats. They were knocking over ringside chairs. They fought in and outside the ring. And finally, Funk broke off a piece of wood off of the ring steps and tried to stab Lawler with it and kill him.
But Lawler powered out and booted his hand, and the spike went in Terry's eye and stabbed him, and he bled, and that's where my eye, Lance, my goddamned eye came from. And he went to Japan for a month and came back wearing an eye patch and vowed revenge on Lawler. And there's where even two guys as brilliant as Terry Funk and Jerry Lawler with psychology and booking and performing and everything involving the wrestling business could go astray, and they admitted this later on. They hurt the wrong guy. It would have worked if the heel had hurt Lawler and Lawler came back with an eye patch on vowing revenge, but it didn't really work when the babyface hurt the heel and the heel came back vowing revenge because they were happy that Lawler had gotten rid of Funk and injured him like that. And they didn't want to see Funk come back. And when he did come back, they certainly didn't want to see him get revenge on Jerry Lawler. So basically, when he came back, they still had some great matches and double juice pull apart brawls and just insane cage matches and everything. But they had to basically start all over again with the program because they had blown it off. They'd blown off the heat by Lawler hurting Terry Funk and putting him out of action for a month. And so they had to start all over again when they came back. So even guys that smart and that talented can sometimes do the wrong thing, but the match itself, because it was such a TV spectacle, has lived on in infamy, as they say, since 1981 for that. And then, of course, The Rock and Mick Foley redid it for that Super Bowl Sunday show that one time. And, of course, they had a bigger budget, so it wasn't quite as plausible. But I've noticed everything about professional wrestling. Whenever you spend more money to do something in wrestling, it looks phonier. Yeah. When you have a budget and you can do what if we did this and what if we did that? You couldn't do that in the old days. The Tupelo concession stand brawl we talked about with Honky Tonk Man or whatever, when they've tried to redo it, they set up fake concession stands. They have all the money to spend to set up all these things, and you can tell it's not real. In the days where wrestling did not have a huge budget, you just went out and 2 guys or 4 guys had a fight in an existing location, and it looked pretty fucking real because it was an existing location. It wasn't a set. And the only thing that a budget does is kind of fuck things up and make it look less believable. These guys were all 4 within the space of a couple of years given chances to make more money than they'd ever made in their life, doing something that only really 2 of them were really superiorly talented at, by a promoter that they then turned around while they were working for him and fucking shit on the business in that guy's biggest arena, the most famous arena in the world, Madison Square Garden, exposed the business in front of fans for no reason. It didn't fit anything to do with any story that was being told or anything that would help the company out. It was purely self-serving reasons. Baby faces hugging heels in public at a wrestling show in Madison Square Garden at a time where it was not commonplace for that to fucking happen. Jerry Jarrett said it on the program. What would you do if you had guys like that did that and wouldn't drop belts and held the company hostage? And he said, his quote was, it'd be like the morning after they shot President Kennedy. You'd be sorry that they were gone, but life would continue. He would have fired all 4 of them because you can't have that. And I don't know why Vince McMahon was such of a pussy and so dickless and for the genetic jackhammer with the balls like grapefruits to let these 4 fucking adolescent fucks jack off on his show and hold his company hostage and do all that shit and get away with it. I've never been able to figure it out. I wasn't a fan of these 4 because they hung out with each other, because I didn't like the way that some of them treated friends of mine. I didn't think that a couple of them were any fucking good. Shawn Michaels, I've said publicly, to me and everybody else that I liked or gave a shit about, was a prick. And so I was never fans, but I didn't think they should be disqualified and never be booked again and be kicked out of the wrestling business. But after that, that's why I've truthfully, after the curtain call, I've never had any fucking time for any of the 4 of them, because instead of being, even if they weren't grateful for the shot they'd been given after fucking Shawn Michaels, numerous times, pretty much, not all of them, but most of them had either been pilled up and fucked up and it had been overlooked, or they'd not done jobs they were supposed to do, or had asked off some kind of outside the ring behavior and it had been overlooked, or the one guy,
the son-in-law now. He'd only been in the company a fucking year. He was hanging around. He was the freshman hanging around with the fucking senior football players, and he didn't have any goddamn leverage, and he goes out there and participates in it, and they let him get away with it, and this was 5 years before he was fucking the boss's daughter. And the whole thing was fucking ridiculous. That just showed everybody else in the company there's no discipline here, and these guys get away with doing whatever the fuck they want. And I'm sorry. That's once again, that's why I've never had any use for any of the four of them, because they exposed the business publicly before it was done, before that kind of thing was done, in the world's most famous arena, and slapped the guy that was paying them more money than they ever made in the face, even if they weren't, as I was about to say, grateful. They were about to leave and go somewhere else, a couple of them, where they'd make more money than they'd ever made in their life again. And they just have to they can't show any restraint. They just have to show everybody we run this thing. And Vince McMahon was such a big fucking pussy on that night that he rolled over like an old whore the week of fucking prom and just spread his legs for everybody. And I've never been able to figure it out. And if I had been involved in any promotion or booking, if I'd had the stroke or the pull to do so, I would have fired all four of them, and they would have never seen the inside of a goddamn wrestling show ever again, because it was just fucking disrespectful. So if anybody disagrees with me, please send your comments to fuck you, because I don't care.
It's similar to what you're just saying, but I would separate Shawn Michaels from the pack. Even though he's one of the most talented wrestlers of all time, how many times do you get to be unprofessional and get away with it?
Well, he was the worst one. He was the worst one, yes.
Yeah. How many, he never dropped it. Other than Steve Austin, I don't think he dropped any of the titles he had by pinfall. It was always some, mysterious lost his smile. Or
I think there was one in there early on. I think somebody did a study and found out that he dropped like 2 out of 9 or something like this. Is some.
Yeah, I guess Jannetty actually pinned him for the Intercontinental title. But the thing is with him, he was unprofessional behind the scenes. He was unprofessional in terms of not doing what wrestling, what you're supposed to do, what your job is. And yet Vince McMahon treated him like he was drawing like Jim Landis, which clearly wasn't the case.
No, it wasn't, as a matter of fact. And during the year that he was champion in 1996, I was in the office, and I can show you the facts and figures. And he was not drawing like Jim Landos. Far from it. He was drawing like Jim fucking Norton.
Rocky just debuted in the company 3 months.
Was that on this Thursday Raw?
I have that on this Thursday Raw.
Look at there. Look what was written down, and I haven't changed it, which means it may have been late. Rocky Austin. Boy, that was a...
Who'd you have Hunter with?
Bob Holly. But,
was this too soon for him, for Rocky?
Yeah, people they saw through it, because he'd only debuted at Survivor Series, which was in November.
Yeah.
Oh, no, at the Garden, I believe, wasn't it? Because I think I was at ringside during Rocky's match. Boy, these bifocals, they're trifocals. I try to see anything.
MSG.
Yes, Survivor Series 96, by the way, did $529,522 at the gate with tickets of $200, $35, $30, $25, $20, and $15. But anyway, yeah, there, Yoko, the mystery partner. That was, I believe that was Rocky. Anyway, no, there was Rocky down there. Oh, God damn it.
But too soon for Rocky.
The point is, too soon for Rocky. We saw his dark match in Corpus Christi, and immediately you knew he looked great, he moved well, he had instincts that guys who had his level of training shouldn't have as far as how to move around in the ring. He'd worked out some with his dad. Tom Pritchard was working out with him in the warehouse in Stamford, and I went over there one day and watched it. I said, "How much training have you had?" He said, "I worked out some with my dad." I would have thought that he'd been through wrestling school for a year. So anyway, we knew, and I told Vincent to start, I said, whatever you do with Rocky Maivia, which was going to be the name that paid tribute to his father, Rocky Johnson, and his grandfather, Peter Maivia. I said, whatever you do with Rocky Maivia, his look, his music, whatever, make it sound like that this is the WWF champion in 5 years. They gave him the hokey fucking... I don't know what all the ribbons, was that the Rock and Roll Express? Was it supposed to be vaguely Samoan, reminiscent of a Samoan that wears polyester? I don't know what that was, but I said, and kind of cheesy music, I said, make it cool because he's going to be your champion in 5 years, and he did it in 3. But Pat Patterson wanted to push him also, but Pat made him the smiling baby face, and Rocky, that's what he was doing first. He thought that would work at first because you go out and be a smiling baby face. But then he was smart enough to see when it wasn't working that it was actually working against him and figure out a way to turn it around. And because he was going to get every opportunity because not only of who he was, but how good he was, then they said, okay, let's run with this. And Russo, I will admit, Russo had a hand in that as far as saying, well, let him be antisocial. Because Russo, everybody's antisocial. So sooner or later, he's going to hit one where it was good for the guy to do that. But that's the thing, is die, Rocky, die, and Rocky took it and ran with it.
Right.
If you couldn't cut that promo like he does, if you didn't have the mind to come up with those phrases, it wouldn't have worked. But it worked because it was that guy doing it. It was right for him. It wasn't a gimmick that you could have put on the fucking chimp whose ass you shaved. And
Should we go into now the main event story of the week? The poor Titus O'Neal, free Titus. You saw the footage, I'm assuming.
Oh, of course.
And I was so upset that last week we taped the program because for you folks, we do pre-tape so that we have time to send this to MLW Radio, and Court Bauer tacks it up with thumbtacks. He's so fucking cheap. So we tape on Tuesday afternoon, and this happened like Tuesday evening, and it was all over Twitter and all over the internet on Wednesday. But for those of you who have been living under the same rock that George Bush has been, apparently after they have the nice ceremony for Brian Danielson, and he makes his retirement speech, everybody's going back up the ramp. They're they're going right under the Obstructatron 5000, as Bolin calls it. It's not the Titantron, it's the Obstructatron 5000, because in these big buildings, it obstructs about 5,000 seats. So they can say they're sold out without actually selling out these big buildings. Yeah. So they're walking up the ramp under the Obstructatron 5000, and all the stars are lining the way. And here comes Vince and Stephanie and the slow-petted Cro-Magnon son-in-law. And Titus O'Neal apparently playfully reaches out and just, grabs Vince by the arm and say, hey, ladies first, is apparently what the story has been now, as the way it's been told. Hey, ladies first, to let Stephanie go. And Vince turns around and shoves that motherfucker like he was about to be the victim of a carjacking. Did you see the heat, just the sudden, just rawr, Vince? Why was there enough there that you would go after somebody like that and just shove the fuck out of him and get hot? What the fuck was Vince thinking about, do you think?
By all accounts, a nice guy, a guy who was won Father of the Year, and I'm not talking Fritz von Erich Father of the Year. I'm talking about a legitimate charitable Father of the Year, a good guy. I think there's just this double standard there where it's, as Vince said on Steve Austin's show, you gotta lighten up. You gotta have fun making fun. Everyone should have fun when Vince wants to have fun. But if you try to have fun with Vince when he doesn't want to, all of a sudden you get suspended. The word has come out that originally he wanted to fire him, and Triple H and Joey Mercury had to talk him down from a 90-day suspension. I believe now it's been cut to a 60-day suspension. Either way, he misses his Mania payday, which is really the big punishment of all. And, again, it's a double standard. You tell me, you worked up there. Well, Vince is someone who plays around and likes to have fun, right? When he wants to.
Well, but he's a Republican, so he, once again, he picks and chooses, what rights and freedoms. But I didn't even see anything there that the Vince McMahon that I knew 15 years ago or whatever the fuck would freak out about, especially when it wasn't some. And once again, here's the same Vince McMahon that put up with that pillhead fucking Shawn Michaels.
That's the big argument always.
That put up with the Clique, and they're fucking just wiping their feet on his business and just obstructing everything and fucking the dressing room up and causing ill will amongst everybody and all that shit. But here this guy just and it wasn't even on, it was barely on the fucking show. You wouldn't have known anything was going on except Vince turned around and shoved the fucking guy so hot, right?
And they edited it off the network, so I believe the footage is no longer there.
And then they had to take it down and cut it off and everything. But the point is, right as they were fading to black.
Yeah.
No pun intended there with poor Titus. He faded to black. He in Black History Month. That's why I didn't even come up with that. Somebody on Twitter said, hey, for Black History Month, Vince McMahon made a black man history. But in all fucking honesty, a guy who
apparently has not caused trouble before, who looks, does all this charity work and looks like an exemplary employee to the public, instead of some fucking pilled up jack off that's fucking everything up and doesn't want to do jobs and everything. And I don't understand why he would have turned and just shoved the fucking guy. So why would you instantly get hot like that? And then afterwards, why wouldn't, you go back in the back? And this comes from the guy that slapped the shit out of Santino Marella, because he actively was being a fucking wise ass and fucked with the business and fucked with one of the boys on camera and in front of fans. And why wouldn't you just say, why did you grab me? It wasn't the time to grab me, Titus. Don't grab me again. Sorry, boss. Okay, fine. Move on. They want to fire him. Then they suspend him. Then they look like fucking idiots in front of the whole world. Apparently, Vince takes being a Republican to mean that you're supposed to look like a stupid fuck and an irresponsible, irrational idiot in front of fucking people.
If John Cena had done that, or if Shawn Michaels had done that, do you think they would receive the same punishment?
Well, of course not.
But there you go. There's the double standard.
But I don't even see why I don't even know why, if one of the ring crew guys had done it. It's not like he came up and popped Vince with a fucking right cross to the fucking jaw. He grabbed him on the arm. If Vince had kept walking, I don't think he would have been able to hold him back. If Vince had just gone, what the fuck do you want? Ladies first? Oh, Stephanie, pal. Oh. Vince made the deal out of it and made it noticeable. Would not have been noticeable had not for Vince lost his fucking head.
Correct.
Maybe it's all the fucking, human growth hormone or whatever, because he's on the cover of Muscle and Fitness at 73 years old. I don't know, but then he should like Titus O'Neal, because Titus O'Neal's biggest quality is he's a jacked up bodybuilder. Vince loves that kind of thing. I was surprised he's being upset about being manhandled by a big jacked up bodybuilder. If it had been Daniel Bryan, who just retired, if it hadn't been his retirement ceremony, if he'd have been the flunky standing there on the stage, he probably would have fired him, because he never wanted him there to begin with. And he's probably still pissed off that he got over. But it just, I couldn't believe, when I first heard about it, I was like, holy shit, what did this guy say or do? I thought he whispered in his ear, you motherfucker, you fucked that poor guy all this time. Now he's got to retire. Now that, okay, bam, we got some fisticuffs.
And then the company, because they didn't like the heat they were getting for it, because they were getting heat for the fact that it happened. But then also a lot of people were accusing them of racism because it happened to Titus O'Neal and questioning whether it would happen like that to a white wrestler. Then they released his text message that he sent the office apologizing to the press, which I think is a little inappropriate as well.
Well, besides, what does that prove? Well, the boss had a fucking senior moment and flipped the fuck out on me, even though I didn't really do anything that wrong. So I guess I better apologize, because he's talking about firing me.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's the most sincere apology ever. And actually, the one thing that Batista said that I've agreed with in the last fucking 16 years since we were saddled with training him here in Louisville, was that he called or texted or wrote or fucking sent up a flare or whatever and told Titus O'Neal he ought to ask for his release. And I truthfully, and we know there's only one place to work, folks, but, and I'm sure he's got a nice contract, but actually, I would say I've quit higher paying jobs than that. If he really had any fucking gumption, and especially if he had any other place to go, which is another reason why the boys are over a barrel, I'd have told Vince McMahon, you know what? Fuck you, asswipe. You want to fucking make a big deal out of this? I was just kidding around. How about if you think you're so fucking tough, you want to be on the cover of Muscle and Fitness, come down, let's get in the ring next week, and the loser has to fucking be suspended. How about that? If and that's the way that the boys would have handled it back in the old days when there was other places to work, which is another reason why the wrestling business sucks today compared to then, because you didn't have to put up with shit like that. Ernie Ladd, he was famous for this. If he goddamn came to a show and he saw a big house out there and he was in a main event and he felt he had built it and his money wasn't right, or he was having a problem with the promoter or whatever, he'd take his fucking bag and he would walk out into the arena and he would make a circle around the ring and everybody would see him, and nobody else looked like Ernie Ladd. So you would see Ernie Ladd and he'd walk right out the front door. And then what are they going to do? Ernie Ladd's plane's late. He can't be here for the main event tonight, or Ernie Ladd's car broke down? No.
I think Brody used to do that too.
Brody used to do it too, because that's back when the boys had some fucking power, because there were places to go and you didn't have to take it. You didn't have to eat shit and like it, as one of Vince McMahon's favorite comments is. And you didn't have to be fucking pushed around by a goddamn lunatic senior citizen that's on fucking the rich, expensive human growth hormone they can't pick up in the tests because he's fucking demented and thinks that at 73 years old he's still supposed to be jacked up like fucking Superman. You didn't have to put up with that. And that's another reason why I say that the goddamn wrestling business has been shot to hell, because the boys have to now eat this shit and put up with this stuff instead of just saying, fuck you, old man. I'll fight you, fuck you, or run you a foot race. If we don't agree, I'll go someplace else and work. And you can kiss my ass. You can't do that anymore.
Yeah, well, but the other thing.
You can, but you have to be prepared then not to go, which, and I got news for you, folks. Staying home and not being on the road, very underrated. It is lovely. I can testify to that.
Well, if someone, too, said, fuck you, old man, I'm leaving, I guarantee that for at least a year, they'd be able to get enough high-priced indie bookings that, it would cover it for a year.
Oh, and actually, if you're any good, which I don't know whether Titus O'Neal is, because I've never seen him wrestle. And now that I'm taking up for him, I've never seen him once on TV because I don't watch the show. But if he's any good, as AJ Styles has proven and as a few other people have proven, you can make quite a good living out there.
Yeah.
But it's fucking ridiculous. Fucking ridiculous. So mark me down as an official member of the Titus O'Neal fan club. If he'd have just knocked, and I'm still on his side, but if he'd have just knocked Vince out and said, fuck it, I'll go do something else, that he would have.
Sanity suddenly reared its ugly head. I remember, I don't know when they debuted. It was sometime in as a matter of fact, I could probably find out. 1996, I'll just flip around. If I could find Tulsa, because we were at Vince McMahon's house, and we were writing television, and that was a Thursday, and I left the next day on Friday to go to Tulsa and Oak City for the house shows, because I believe I was still managing Vader. I can't find it, nevertheless. The point is, I get to Tulsa, and some of the guys say, Nash and Hall are coming back? I'm like, what are you talking about? Well, I think this was right when the website first went up. You might know this, 97-ish or late 96-ish, or some way or another they'd announced this news on Livewire or some shit that Diesel and Razor are coming back. I said, I was just at the owner of the company's house yesterday. I'm on the creative team. We were writing television. No, I know nothing of this. And suddenly he's announced to the world. And so all weekend we're like, what the fuck? And I called, I don't even know if Bruce was there. Bruce knew. I talked to Bruce on Sunday and he said, oh yeah, we're going to do this. And when I heard the idea, he'd gotten up that morning and said, I own the rights to Diesel and Razor Ramon, so we're just going to have them. And he got Rick Bogner to be Razor Ramon, and he got
Doug Furness.
Glenn Jacobs to be Diesel. But no, here's the story. Even though this is in 1997, you don't mind, do you?
No.
I said, okay, how are we going to do this? He basically wanted me to teach them how to be Razor Ramon and Diesel. I had to go to the TV studio and have Dave Benoit or one of the guys there make me tape. I said, give me 5 or 6 Razor Ramon and 5 or 6 Diesel matches so that, I can make notes and tell these guys. I watched them at home, wrote down the moves. Nash, that's where I got the line 6 moves. I wrote down every move that Kevin Nash did, every idiosyncrasy he did in the ring, and I got to 6, and that was with the hair flip. The back elbow, the side knees in the deal, the fucking flipper punch, the fucking hair. It's side slam, and there's something else. It's been 15 years, so power bomb, yes. There you go. You find another one, motherfucker. Up till 1996, you go to one of his matches and find him doing something else. So anyway, and that's not a knock or a criticism, but it's a statement. It was right there. You could list it. And Razor Ramon was a little more difficult. So, and we went to the studio, to the ring they had set up before developmental in the warehouse, and They practiced, in Glenn's case, those 6 moves, and in Wagner's case, whatever the fuck. And why? I don't understand. I don't know why anybody thought it was a good idea. Well, nobody thought it was a good idea, probably. It's just that nobody could talk Vince out of it, so it was going to happen.
Will Tony Anthony ever get a break?
No, he would apparently not. Once again, the TL Hopper didn't work out, but they saw something, and also, Tony was a great talker, but it once again it was scuffling hillbillies, 1950s bullshit that Vince saw when he was a kid. The Godwins from fucking Pig Snort, Tennessee or whatever, and their Uncle Cletus. He tried the same thing with Ron and Don Harris, the Blue, Jacob and Eli Blue with Dutch, Uncle Zebekiah or Zebediah or whatever the fuck. It's always got to be a cartoon. Nothing can be legitimate. It has to be over the top and overdone and gone too far. And, Tony was country as he could fucking be, but nobody was country as Uncle Cletus or whatever. And to me, it was just silly. And the hog slop. Okay, even if they do, there are people who really slop hogs for a living, but they don't carry a bucket of this shit around with them. It was just cartoon.
I was about to say, do we have a palate cleanser after that?
Well, we do, because that leads into Vince McMahon's biggest flaw, because he's talked about this, what's best for business. It's a goddamn angle now. It's a gimmick. Do what's best for business. Vince McMahon started this whole thing because the one good thing that I will say about billionaires is that they don't have to do shit that they don't want to do, right? If you're a billionaire, why would you have to do shit that you don't want to do? Why would you have to associate with anybody you don't want to associate with? Why would you have to go anywhere you don't want to go? Because you're a fucking billionaire. But Vince McMahon has started this what's best for business thing. Well, I've already mentioned in Kenny King's example, it's not even best for business, because you could find Amelia Earhart easier than you could find a fucking wrestling ticket that Kenny King has sold. But Vince McMahon has started this do what's best for business. I first started losing respect for Vince McMahon when I still worked in Stamford. When he sat me down at the table one time, Bruce Pritchard was there. I was there, and it was in fucking Vince's living room where we used to write TV. And I can't even remember what prompted this now. But I was ranting about somebody, fucking some asshole that had fucked us around some kind of way. And Vince said, Jim, in business, you've got to learn to eat shit and like the taste of it. I said, what? You got to learn to eat shit and like the taste of it in business. You're going to eat a lot of shit, like the taste of it. Now, when you go home, that's your castle. Whatever the fuck. You're the king of your castle. And I just looked at him, and I'm like, what the fuck? Because here's the thing. That didn't, to me, sound like fatherly advice. Now, I didn't get a lot of fatherly advice from my dad. He died when I was just after I turned 7. So I didn't get that, opportunity. But I can see from things I've heard about him, things I've read about him, things that I've heard from people who knew him, I can see my dad saying things to me like always stand up for what you believe in and always tell the truth and always treat people fairly. And I mean, there's letters and things that have been written in newspaper articles and et cetera about him, because he was a fairly prominent guy around Louisville, that he would say things like that. And if you think you're right, go for it, whatever the fuck, good shit like that, right? I can never envision my dad saying, learn to eat shit like the taste of it. I can't imagine that. Wouldn't have happened. And he lived his life that way, and it bore that out, things I've been able to determine about him. But Vince McMahon, a billionaire who don't have to put up with shit, has always been the guy. People sue him. People walk out on him. People fuck him. People say horrible things about him, and he brings them back. Not because it's best for business, because it's best for his fucking ego. Because if you think about it, Vince McMahon has the worst inferiority complex of anybody ever in history. And the reason I say that is because he wants to prove that he will fucking do anything with anybody. He will reconcile with anybody, supposedly if it's best for business, but just so he can get them under his thumb again and he can work with them again. And he can prove that they needed him. He grew up in a fucking trailer in North Carolina. That's why he hates Southern people. He never knew his father until he was almost in his teens. He had a horrible childhood where he was abused. He's 70 years old. He's a billionaire. He's still on that human growth hormone. He's still fucking bodybuilding. He's still fucking, he has no hobbies. All he does is work. All he does is want to make more money. He got a massive inferiority complex and he wants to prove to everybody that, and that's why he's always hated wrestling, because he wants to be the Walt Disney of wrestling. That was a quote from him one time back in the 80s, because he wants to fucking prove that he can make major motion pictures and he can run a fucking football fucking league and he can do all this other shit instead of just wrestling. Because he's got a major inferiority complex and he's never gotten over it. And I've always said a team of psychiatrists could fucking retire on just trying to figure out Vince McMahon. But that ultimately, to me, is what has caused all this, as Arn Anderson would say, is Vince McMahon has the biggest inferiority complex that's ever been. And he's got to prove that he can get anybody back under his thumb anytime he wants and that he can succeed at anything. And that's what's led to the ruination of the wrestling business. And that's what's led to people thinking that what best for business? Do you want to deal, if you're a businessman, especially when they're not even going to be of really that much help to you, but even if they are, if you're a billionaire, do you want to deal with people that have lied to you, that have sued you, that have fucked you around, that have done any of these things? Do you want them in your life? Do you want to fucking put your business in their fucking hands, or not even put your business in their hands, but just, do you want to take a risk of them doing it again just to fucking fulfill some goddamn inferiority complex that you've got? Or do you just want to say, you know, I'm going to go with the people that are loyal and dependable and will fucking work for a common goal instead of the people that are only out for themselves and have proved that? That's why I say that Vince McMahon has an inferiority complex. That's why I say that that's the whole thing that's behind what's best for business. And that's why I say that bringing Kenny King back to Ring of Honor or anywhere else in wrestling is not best for business, especially since he couldn't draw fucking flies if you dipped him in shit. And once again, hey, and Vince has my phone number too. Vince, if you disagree with that, give me a fucking call.
Is this seen as a dangerous thing beforehand at all with the potential racial? I mean, you've already got the U.S.
Here we are at October the 20th. And, you know, to be quite honest, and I hadn't thought about that particular issue, I don't, at this point in time, like I said, I was being buttered up, fattened up for the kill. All of a sudden, 2 pay-per-views in a row, I called a couple finishes, got some stipulations in, and a month later, I'm off the fucking, pretty much 6 weeks later, I'm off the fucking creative team. I don't even remember that deal being discussed, but here was the thing. After the stinky show that we talked about in Germany, and well, this Russo, well, he's, like I said, Vince McMahon saw that this fucking guy had all these ideas, and that 1 or 2 of them out of 100 or whatever may be revolutionary. He was getting his ass kicked. For the first time in his life, Vince didn't like the fucking feeling. He wasn't going to roll over and play dead, and I'll give that credit to him. But he was going to come up with something, and as we've seen, Vince Russo nor Vince McMahon mind exposing the business or making the business look bad. I always said wrestling is about doing bad taste and good taste, but they didn't care about the fucking good taste, bad taste. They just wanted to do something. They wanted some ratings. So all of a sudden, right about this time, and also I'm starting to zone out because this shit with Shawn and Brett is now fucking going on, because now we're starting to book Survivor Series and holy fucking jumping shitballs, try to talk about the Mideast peace crisis, try to work that fucking finish out. So I'm starting to zone out here on some of this stuff, and at the same time, it's just becoming, I was developing a fucking twitch. 1 month later, I was 280 pounds. When I went home for Thanksgiving 1997, I weighed 280 pounds. And that's when I fucking ran back into Danny Davis, and he told me about his OVW project.
And I went and had Thanksgiving dinner at my mom's house. And I got home and I got on the scales. I said, I hate this fucking state. I hate this fucking job. I hate myself because I'm a big fat fuck. And all I do is sit in the house and eat because I'm miserable because every time I leave the house, I want to fucking kill somebody. And a lot of that was due to sitting at least one day a week in Vince's house with him and Vince Russo and having to coexist with Vince Russo at television. Because when it started out, when Russo was the editor of the magazine, and he was friends with Bruce Pritchard, and I would go to Bruce's house to allegedly work or really play with his dog during the day, but we were at the phone where the office could find us. Russo would come over, and their wives knew each other, and then when Russo got invited to join the creative team, first it was him and Bruce and me a lot of times. Then it was just, and sometimes JR would join, but sometimes it was just me, Vince Russo, and Vince McMahon. I even rode in the car with Vince Russo, some of the TVs and back, would tell him stories. I assumed at first, I really did, we got along, you know, it was good old New York Vinny Roo with the fucking accent, and I was the Southern boy that liked fucking cheeseburgers, and we had our gimmicks, right? And everything was happy. And I said, this guy has a world of passion, apparently, for the business, and it's just a cultural thing. I mean, he's New York, and I'm Southern. But once he learns about the wrestling business, because he's never been involved in it, he actually came back. We was already on the creative team, came back from a TV taping back to the locker room where he had done on cameras because they made him the co-host color guy of WWF New York. They revoiced their own program for WOR Channel 9, right? Just for the New York area. So they put Russo on it. He comes back one time. He said, that was cool. I said, what? I said, doing on cameras? He said, no, being inside the barricade when a match is going on. He's already writing the shit. He's never been in the fucking inside the barricade while a match is going on, and he's writing the fucking show. I'm thinking, you know, when this guy, when he learns something about wrestling, when he understands from the performing and the business side, what you can do and what you can't do and what you should do or shouldn't do and how the people take to the nuances, boy, he's got all these ideas, he'll be great. I didn't realize at the time, which has become apparent in the intervening 15 fucking years, Vince Russo was never a wrestling fan. He always said, I was a wrestling fan, I just didn't like the phony-looking wrestling. The phony-looking wrestling, meaning, I guess, anything besides a bunch of people standing there calling each other their real names and talking about shoot-worked angles. Matches are completely out, because that's phony-looking. Vince was a fan of angles. Vince was a fan of certain personalities. Vince was a fan of highlights. He saw shit that he liked involved in the wrestling presentation, and he retained those. He just had no idea why they were done, how they got there, and how they got out of it, and the fact that usually 6 or 9 months happened in between, right? So it became obvious to me after a while that he didn't want to learn anything. I was trying to teach him about wrestling. He didn't want to learn about wrestling. He wanted to change wrestling to this vision that he had of whatever the fuck it is, where logic has no purpose and nobody knows what the fuck's going on, but it's all a work, except we're really shooting while we're working because really what we do is fake, but then we try to fucking really double cross each other in our fake shit, and that's real, and so keep tuning in because we don't know what the fuck we're talking about.
Easy to follow.
And finally, it became, like I said earlier, by this time in the year, that was my day to go over there and sit in a room with Vince McMahon, the most powerful man in professional wrestling, and listen to this fucking moron who didn't know anything about fucking wrestling rattle off 100 fucking ideas, 2 of which Vince heard some type of genius in and would take them and then give his best announcer in the business and the top 2 stars in the business and his network quality television studio, all these instructions based on this fucking moron's ideas. What I was hearing was the other 98 that were making me try to go find a fucking chainsaw and chop this motherfucker's head off because he would have killed the fucking business, which he, since he's left the watchful eye of Vince McMahon, has killed every business he's come in contact with. After fucking Hell in a Cell, Undertaker, fucking Tombstone by Kane, Vince McMahon has said, I want that match for WrestleMania next year, which was going to be April, let's just find it. son of a gun, March 29 in Boston, Massachusetts. So November, December, January, February, we got 5 months. Vince Russo wants the next goddamn week, wants fucking Undertaker or Kane to choke slam Undertaker through the announcer's table. He was big on wrecking the announcer's table. I think he just had it in for announcers. Or maybe even the other way around. The point is, I said, no, Vince, hold on. We just shot a fucking angle. We got 5 months before this match. Right now, Undertaker doesn't want to fight his brother. His brother screwed him one time. So Kane is going to go around and take it out on everybody else and shame the Undertaker into fighting him. But if he just fucking choke slams Undertaker again through a fucking table, or you have Undertaker retaliate, you've blown the story, and then you've shot the angle 5 months for a match. Well, we could just do something else before the match to get... No, you dumb shit. Anyway, so point is, that's where I was at as we're leading into the last bit of the month here. Vince McMahon had a Southern thing going, but Vince Russo also had a Southern thing going. And I don't know why that Vince Russo and Jeff Jarrett became so close, because Jeff Jarrett should be everything that Vince Russo don't like. A second-generation wrestler from Nashville, Tennessee, but yet somehow they melded and meshed, and that was the beginning of that blossoming.
So this was a Russo creation. This wasn't something Jeff's was speaking from the heart when he said Austin would be the ringmaster forever.
Everything that fucking, well, that's probably what they said in conversations. So then Russo says, okay, bringing out, and I learned from Jerry Jarrett, the smart one in the Jarrett family, who knows that Vince Russo is a fucking insane lunatic. You tell people when you want to work a wrestling angle or issue or situation, you tell people as much of the truth as you possibly can that they know to be the truth. And then when you veer off into the work part, they say, well, wait a minute, A, B, and C was legitimate. I know that's true, so that's what you do. So Russo's taken it to such extreme that he dreams up shit that's really real and then has you say it like it's really real based it on a working environment. I don't know what the fuck he's doing. Anyway. He wasn't smiling again, folks. God, it was never ending. It was never ending with personal issues of a guy who was making $750,000 a fucking year. Go ahead. Patriot.
With Del Wilkes. The Patriot thing is now, is this going to play off the USA-Canada thing? Are they trying to have a groundswell of patriotism?
Well, here's the thing, and I don't even remember who recommended Del or how they originally started talking, but when I see Del Wilkes, the Patriot, which was a gimmick that he'd been doing in Japan for quite a while, he had a great body. He had years of experience. He could do a fucking good promo. His outfit, his gimmick looked good. His mask was colorful. He was a good guy. He was dependable. He'd show up and do what he was asked to do. Every quality, and we needed new top baby faces. So when he became on the radar, I was pushing for him to be used as good as he could be used. It wasn't my idea to bring him the company, although I wouldn't deny that responsibility, but I'm not taking credit for it. It wasn't me. But once I saw, hey, we're getting the Patriot, I said, let's use this motherfucker. And it played right into the U.S.-Canada thing, but that's what led to, as a matter of fact, my God, the very next week, Halifax, Nova Scotia, on Monday, July 21st, is where I about pulled Kevin Dunn over the fucking table in the production meeting, which I think we've told the story, but...
Tell it again.
Well, see, here's the thing. The Patriot had just started, right? I don't even think he was on house shows. He wasn't on that house show. So the point is, we've just got this guy, and he's just starting to get over. But the Hart Foundation group didn't like him. He didn't have any political allies because for some reason or other, the Harts, Davey or Owen, whoever, didn't want to work with him. I don't remember why. But at the same time, nobody in Shawn Michaels' group, his faction, gave a shit about Del. Del was just coming to do his job and try to get over as a talent. So in this country, it was great, boo cheer for Shawn Michaels and boo Bret Hart in this country, and in Canada, vice versa. Cheer for Bret Hart, boo Shawn Michaels. But I said, this guy's only been around for a week or two. We were at the production meeting in Halifax. I said, why do we want him to come out and get booed out of the building, even in Canada, and have the Hart Foundation do this shit to him where he doesn't get any rebuttal, he doesn't get any comeback, he's booed by the fans, you're going to have him beat up. I can't remember what the specific details were, but somewhere or another, Patriot is just going to go out and get shit on that night by everybody. Now, they've booked Raw in Halifax, Nova Scotia. For those of you who have been to Halifax, A, it's an hour even ahead of Eastern time. B, if you didn't go to fish or hunt, you're fucked. And also, you can't get there. They flew us in on Saturday morning because a Saturday night stay ticket was cheap. Otherwise, it was $2,000 a piece. I'm like, you found this out after you fucking booked it? So we all had to go to Halifax, fucking Nova Scotia on Saturday morning for a Monday night live television show. So as the Sunday night production meeting comes, I've already been sitting in this hotel for a day and a fucking half after a flight to Nova Scotia. Got to be there for another day just for one fucking television show. So we're discussing this, and there's Kevin Dunn, and there's Jim Ross, and there's Bruce Pritchard, and there's me, and there's Vince McMahon, and there's whoever else is in the room. I mean, I'm sure Russo's there, yes. And I said, guys, I don't understand why we're doing this, in this way to the Patriot. He's going to get shit on. He's going to get beat. He's not looking good. Why the fuck are we burying this new top babyface? And then they start going to the Sable T-shirt spot, and I keep bringing it back because I just want somebody, A, to resolve this, and B, give me one good reason why we have to bury the fucking guy. But they keep changing fucking topics to the T-shirt spot or Sable or whatever the fuck. And so finally I said, well, I'm still wondering about the Patriot. And Kevin Dunn goes, Jim, I find you tiresome. I looked at him, I said, you know what I'm tired of, motherfucker? I'm tired of them Bucky Beaver fucking teeth of yours. And I stand up and I say, and I'm going to pull you across this goddamn table and beat the fuck out of you, which, folks, I'm not Ken Shamrock. I'm not Randy the Natural Couture, but I can whip Kevin Dunn, especially in those days because I was younger and had better knees. And as that happens, everybody starts laughing as like the guy's going to stand up and say something and it's a joke, right? And everybody starts laughing except for Jim Ross, who knew that I was really about to grab Kevin Dunn and pull him over the guy because I just snapped. I was fucking done. And Jared's like, no. I said, no, fuck this fucking shit. When you guys want to talk about some fucking wrestling, come get me. I'll be in my fucking room. And I left and goddamn went up to my fucking room and sat there for another fucking week or another day, seemed like a week, before the goddamn show. And I got out of production meetings with Kevin Dunn for 3 weeks because he didn't want to be in the same room with me. And then it came to Jim from Vince McMahon. You've got to apologize to Kevin Dunn. He's a very important member of the team here. His father once saved the fucking TV tapes from his burning car trunk or whatever. So Kevin's got a job for life. So Kevin Dunn comes over to Vince's house and we sit just the two of us. Vince leaves us alone in Vince's dining room. And as I'm first and only time I've ever apologized to anybody when I didn't mean it, but at the same time, goddamn this fucking guy, he treated me like I was the guy that ran the Ferris wheel at the county fair. Ever since I'd fucking been there, the wrestling thing and the southern thing and the northern thing, and I was about fed up with this motherfucker. But Vince demanded it. Vince wanted me to. I work here, so I'm going to apologize to the guy. The fucking guy starts crying. But you don't understand, the kids in school, I was always teased about and he started tears, I swear to God, on my mother's grave. Kevin Dunn cried while I was apologizing to him about knocking his Bucky Beaver fucking teeth that everybody talks about behind his back. And he was crying because the kids used to tease him in school, and he was, how could I be mad at the guy when he's crying at me? But at the same time, motherfucker, especially now since you make $2 or $3 million a year since the stock scam, get your fucking teeth fixed. All right? Sorry. I digress.
Waiting for a particular name to come up. You've mentioned Jeff, you've mentioned Dutch, and of course,
yes,
anyone thinks TNA and they think management. Your first impressions of Dixie Carter?
Didn't meet Dixie, I don't think. I'm trying to think how long it was, because then as I started going, I was going so much, but I didn't meet Dixie that day. I don't know if she was there, I didn't meet her, whatever. I came in late because I was a surprise, but
But the first time I met Dixie, anyway, we did the pay-per-view, we did the TV, blah, 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 everything's great. I even cut the promo because the reason why I wanted to work there, obviously, there were several reasons. Number one, competition of Vince McMahon. So there's not a monopoly. Somebody somewhere has given him some competition. Number two, they got a great talent roster at the time, a lot of great guys. Number three, obviously, not only do I want to work with Dutch, just because that way he entertained me, but also Jeff Jarrett. I even cut the promo that night on the pay-per-view because Jeff was a heel then, and I said, Jeff Jarrett, I looked in the camera, I said, Jeff Jarrett, I knew your grandmother. She was a wonderful woman, and she'd be turning over in her grave, spinning in her grave right now if she knew what a no-good son of a gun you've turned out to be, right? And it was heavy, right? Because his grandmother did start me in the wrestling business, and his father, carried that on. So that was great, and then you asked the question, the first time I met Dixie, this was probably a harbinger of things to come. The first time I met Dixie was probably a couple of times later, because I remember I made that shot, and then I wasn't there the next taping, and then, because I had previous commitments. I had finished the thing up with Ring of Honor, that angle, so we did that in July, that conflicted with their taping. And then I was back in August, and it might have been then, but there's this job guy that used to work for Les Thatcher, and I can't even remember what his name now is. Nobody else can either. It doesn't matter. But I remembered him from working for Les Thatcher in Cincinnati, the HWA, and he was there because he had moved to Florida, and he was there backstage, and he said hello to me, and I looked at his face. I said, hey, and whatever your name is. I said, hey, how you doing? I went to shake his hand. The backstory on this that I did not know was he was trying to get a job because now his real job in Florida was he was an exterminator, like bugs and rats and pests and things. Rats. And he wanted to make a gimmick out of that. Well, believe me, the wrestling business exterminated all the rats a long time ago before, you didn't have to gas them. You just ran them off because nobody was servicing them. But anyway, he was an exterminator and he was going to make his gimmick an exterminator. And as I go to shake his hand, he holds his hand out and he has a legitimate giant, live, living fucking tarantula in his hand. Mm-hmm. I don't coexist with spiders. I don't coexist with snakes. My name is not Jim Stafford, but I don't like spiders and snakes, and I don't care what it takes. No. And I got hot. You fucking idiot, what the fuck? And I jumped back, and he starts smiling, and I said, motherfucker, don't fucking smile. I'll go get in my goddamn car and run you the fuck down. You get that fucking thing away from me, and you stay far away from me as you possibly can. What kind of fucking idiot brings a goddamn, it was bigger than his hand, a live tarantula, and just fucking sticks it in people's faces? Fuck him. And I don't remember your name, but fuck you, if you see this ever today. If you're still alive, if you haven't been bitten by a poisonous fucking spider. So I fucking go in the back. Well, I don't know if you've been there, but you have to leave the sound stage. You come through the outside area, even though it's covered up, it's outside. And then you go in the hallway where the offices are, and I see Terry Taylor. My other old friend, Terry Taylor, who was working in the office at the time, and he's talking to some woman. And I said, Terry, this fucking job guy out there's got a fucking tarantula. I'm going to fucking kill him. He stuck a live tarantula in my fucking face, and that's bullshit. We need to run him off the goddamn property, because what the fuck? And Terry said, hi, Jim, meet Dixie Carter. Hey, okay. Dixie, how you doing? It's good to meet you. So maybe that was, a harbinger of things to come, but that's how I met Dixie Carter.
Okay, and impressions?
So it wasn't a rib, but it was a rib.
Wonderful. Graham McPhail. Question all the way from Scotland. Why does Jim think Vader, who he was managing at the time, was ultimately a flop as top-line star in WWF back in the 90s, seemed to tick every box Vince wants for a big monster heel, but it just never worked out?
I don't think he was a flop. I don't think he did nearly as well as he should have. I think part of the problem was Shawn Michaels. Leon was he's a big, rough, mean, former pro football player, and he was a stiff, hard-hitting guy, and he was but he was he was a big teddy bear also personally. And you could hurt his feelings just like that. And Shawn Michaels is used to everybody, or was used to everybody catering to him, and also was used to people working with him a lot lighter. And I remember one time it was in fucking Tulsa. It was at a house show in Tulsa. There, Leon's got him by the hand and he's fucking peppered him right, boom, boom, boom. And all of a sudden I see Shawn gets out of it and grabs some kind of hold and there's a conversation. I'm like, what the fuck? And then they go on and they go to the finish a couple minutes later and Leon rolls. Of course, Leon lost. It's another thing, a big monster. You know, Frankenstein kicked a few villagers' asses first to get over. Leon rolls out, he's crying. He said, Shawn Michaels told me if I yanked his hair that way, that'd be my job, and he's going to get me fired. And then at SummerSlam 96, go back and watch the fucking tape. Some way or another, Shawn's going to come off the top with a fucking elbow, and Leon's supposed to move, and Leon don't move. And Shawn changes gear in midair and fucking lands right next to him and screams, move! Kicks him. Move, asshole, or dumb shit, or whatever. Shawn Michaels, he was unprofessional. He was always on fucking pills or whatever. And by the way, Shawn, fuck you too. The way you fucking talked to me, the way you talked to Jose Lothario that got you in the business, for the way that you fucking got with your little clique and fucking exposed the business in Madison Square Garden and kowtowed, and everybody had to kowtow to you, and you're whining and you lost your smile and you didn't want to do jobs, and wherever you were pilled up doing whatever the fuck you were doing, you were a fucking asshole and a prick. And if you found God, that's generally because I've noticed people in this business that find God do so when everybody else hates them so bad they won't speak to them. When mortals won't speak to you, you find a higher power. But anyway, between all this stuff going, Shawn didn't want to work with Leon. He didn't want to take the fucking ass kicking. He came with working with Leon. They didn't book Leon. Vince wanted to change his name to the Mastodon. I said, it's fucking Vader. He was a WCW world champion. Everybody in the world knows who he is. Well, we can trademark it. He's a big Mastodon. Fuck. So Leon, he just didn't fit. The guy, the fucking guys that he was supposed to work with didn't get him over. Leon was a high maintenance individual also, and that didn't help him. It just didn't fucking work.
The Michaels incident is chronicled by Vader on our Ringside with Vader disc.
As a matter of fact, I'd like to see that as well.
You can have it. I have one in my bag for you.
Is 100 degrees inside the
more. Literally, the walls were dripping with condensation, and that's also where some drunk fucking fan, while I'm doing the introduction of the Midnight Express, tries to jump in the ring over the top rope, and I'm looking at the camera. We're on live television, and this fan just jumps over the top rope and falls and lands in the ring. And I made some comment about him, and the security drug him out. But it was that kind of crowd, and we were baby faces, so I wasn't worried. And, I told a story. Michael Hayes had teamed up with Jimmy Garvin. Terry Gordy was willing to work dates in between his Japanese commitments, but they needed full-time Freebirds. And this was a big disappointment to me personally, because Jimmy Garvin had been around for a few years at that point, and not only he and Precious were on the road, and he was cheap like me and the Midnight were, so sometimes we'd fly into Atlanta for TV on Crockett's plane. We would all five get a mid-size rental car and pile in just to go to TV and back to save, having to ride in a cab, and we could go where we wanted and everything and save money. And I'd had pizza in their hotel room, and my wife at the time was friends with their nanny because they had kids, and when they'd go on the road, they left a nanny with them. But Jimmy, all of a sudden, Michael was trying to recreate the Freebirds of 10 years before at that point. And Michael was always a great wrestling personality and a great promo, and the reason why Buddy Roberts became a Freebird was because Michael's work was always the shits. And Bill Watts made Buddy a Freebird so it could be Buddy and Terry with Michael doing the talking, so he was de facto the world's largest wrestling manager, But Michael thought that he was going to get power, and he might have even been on the booking committee for a brief time, but he thought that they were going to be the top heel team and recreate the glory period of 10 years before with the Freebirds. And Jimmy Garvin, who had always been a friend of ours, we'd always had a great relationship with, got on supplements, because he's fucking, 5'10", 205, and he was trying to work like a badass. And once again, they didn't want to fucking sell. Now we're baby faces, we're working with another team that don't want to fucking sell. Jimmy Garvin don't want to fucking... I was bigger than Jimmy Garvin, right? As a matter of fact, one time, I'm in the ring with something's happened, the Freebirds do a run-in, Jimmy runs at me and he throws a punch, and he didn't potato me with the punch, but he came charging to where he body checked me, so I fell down without, having to take a bump, but I still would taken a bump and rolled out of the ring and sold while all the shit was cleared out, and baby faces, Dr. Death came in, saved, blah, blah, blah. And I get up and I'm holding my head and I limp and I put my arm around somebody and I walk to the back. He's fucking cutting a promo on me. God damn it. What the fuck? I fucking hit you. You walk like I'm supposed to be carried to the back in the locker room from one punch. Wow. Because he was on the shit. And he thought he was going to be a fucking main event badass. At that fucking size, he had been a chicken shit heel all his life. And now he's cutting a promo on me. I told Eddie Gilbert, who was on the committee at the time, I said, God damn, seriously? What the fuck? He's fucking upset. Just don't worry about it, blah, blah, blah. But that's it. Michael Hayes one time, if I'm at ringside, I'm a babyface manager, which now without an antagonist like Paul Lee on the other side, I'm kind of a spare prick at the wedding anyway, as Adrian Street would say. But, we're having a big brawl with the Freebirds, and I'm trying to sneak up behind Michael to fucking whack him with the racket to give Bobby a graceful way to get away from him or whatever in the middle of all this chaos, and he kept turning around catching me for a shoot. So afterwards, I went up to him. I said, Michael, I was trying to sneak up on you. I said, you kept catching me. I'm laughing, right? And he looked at me. He said, if you hit me with the racket, I wouldn't sell it anyway. I said, what? He said, we got to get over strong, get some heat like the old days. We'll sell chairs. We're not going to sell like the Animal and Hawk and Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair, whoever has sold the tennis racket. And suddenly Michael Hayes is goddamn Superman and can't sell the tennis racket. I said, okay, motherfucker. So finally it came to the fucking, where did it, in my book, 1989 Great American Bash on Tour, or What If They Gave a War and Nobody Came? It was, there we go, July 8th in Boston. The Freebirds, Michael Hayes, Jimmy Garvin, and Terry Gordy versus Bobby Eaton, Stan Lane, and Dr. Death Steve Williams. We had very few incidents in our careers with opponents or with other wrestlers, but this was one of them. We were going into this bash tour. We'd already put them over in the finals for the World Tag Team title, and now we're wrestling them in 6-mans. We had Dr. Death on our side, or tag team matches during a lot of the bash, which was drawing miserable fucking houses. And we get to the Boston Garden, where Stan Lane's debut in 1987, April 1987, came as a member of the Midnight Express in front of like a $150,000 house. The Great American Bash drew $57,000, so that was like less than 5,000 people in the Boston Garden. And it's this long 6-man where they give us some spots, right? And then, of course, I'm a spare prick over here because they got no manager. It's a 6-man, all three of them in the ring. And then they get the heat on Bobby. Bobby sells, and they beat shit out of Bobby, Then they give Stan the hot tag. He makes a comeback, which they moderately sell for, and then they fucking beat us. And then, while Stan's selling and Bobby's still kind of selling and Doc's checking on him and I'm starting to get in the ring, they decide they're going to get some more heat. We don't even know it's coming, and they jump us afterwards. And Dr. Death decided he fucking had enough. Good. So he goes out and grabs one of those old wooden chairs that they had in the Boston Garden, right? And he starts advancing on Jimmy Garvin. 5'10", 205-pound Jimmy Garvin on vitamins. And here comes Dr. Death with a chair, and Garvin will not fucking retreat. So Doc hauls that chair back over his head. I can still hear the sound. And he fucking swung, and Jimmy Garvin sees it coming and puts his arms up. Whack! And Jimmy Garvin goes, fuck! And Doc says, fuck with me! Whack! Fuck! Fuck with me! Whack! Fuck! Fuck with... As Jimmy is retreating and Doc is beating him over the head and arms with this, and pieces of the chair that are not gimmicked are fucking flying, and goddamn Dr. Death, and then me and Bobby and Stan said, fuck, we're following our guy, right? And we're behind him, and he chased him out of the building. Terry Gordy was the only one in the whole match that sold half-ass reasonably well. And he's the only one that shouldn't have.
Any conversation in the locker room?
Yes, I'm about to get to it.
I bet you are.
The locker rooms were separate at that point. We hadn't dressed with them, but we went right on through to the fucking heel side, because now I'm figuring, well, fuck, this is going to be interesting, because Terry's on the other side and Doc's on our side, and we'll see what the fuck. Bobby and Stan versus Michael and Jimmy would have probably been, I would give the edge to Bobby and Stan, and I've had a fucking club in my hand, but the interesting thing was going to be Dr. Death and Terry Gordy. That's the wild card. But I got to stick with the team, right? So I go in not knowing what the fuck's going on, and as they all get in the fucking locker room, and Jimmy Garvin's arm is bleeding, and his fucking head has knots, and everybody started to turn like, here we go, and Bobby Eaton broke, for the first time in memory I can ever recall, yelled at another wrestler in anger, hey, we ain't just fucking here to get you guys over. And it's like everybody snapped out of it. And Terry, who Bobby had known all of them since they were fucking teenagers. Terry like turned around and said, fuck, this is ridiculous. Because he's the only one who was selling for us to begin with. So with Terry not wanting to get physical and everybody snapped and said, Bobby is fucking mad, it dissipated. Jimmy Garvin had to take a few days off. He had bone chips in his elbow. He was all cut up. His fucking head was lumped. He didn't fuck with Dr. Death anymore. Wow. And they started to get a little bit better attitude and started selling a little bit more for us, regardless of what the finish was. But that was an interesting fucking
great occurrence.
He's fucking cutting a promo on me. God damn it. What the fuck? I fucking hit you. You walk like I'm supposed to be carried to the back in the locker room from one punch. Wow. Because he was on the shit. And he thought he was going to be a fucking main event badass. At that fucking size, he had been a chicken shit heel all his life. And now he's cutting a promo on me. I told Eddie Gilbert, who was on the committee at the time, I said, God damn, seriously? What the fuck? He's fucking upset. Just don't worry about it. Blah, blah, blah. But that's it. Michael Hayes one time, if I'm at ringside, I'm a babyface manager, which now without an antagonist like Paulie on the other side, I'm kind of a spare prick at the wedding anyway, as Adrian Street would say. But, we're having a big brawl with the Freebirds, and I'm trying to sneak up behind Michael to fucking whack him with the racket to give Bobby a graceful way to get away from him or whatever in the middle of all this chaos, and he kept turning around catching me for a shoot. So afterwards, I went up to him. I said, Michael, I was trying to sneak up on you. I said, you kept catching me. I'm laughing, right? And he looked at me and said, if you hit me with the racket, I wouldn't sell it anyway. I said, what? He said, we got to get over strong, get some heat like the old days. We'll sell chairs. We're not going to sell like the Animal and Hawk and Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair, whoever has sold the tennis racket. And suddenly Michael Hayes is goddamn Superman. He can't sell the tennis racket. I said, okay, motherfucker. So finally it came to the fucking, where did it, in my book, 1989 Great American Bash on Tour, or What If They Gave a War and Nobody Came? It was, there we go, July 8th in Boston. The Freebirds, Michael Hayes, Jimmy Garvin, and Terry Gordy versus Bobby Eaton, Stan Lane, and Dr. Death Steve Williams. We had very few incidents in our careers with opponents or with other wrestlers, but this was one of them. We were going into this bash tour. We'd already put them over in the finals for the World Tag Team title, and now we're wrestling them in six-mans. We had Dr. Death on our side, or tag team matches during a lot of the bash, which was drawing miserable fucking houses. And we get to the Boston Garden, where Stan Lane's debut in 1987, April 1987, came as a member of the Midnight Express in front of like a $150,000 house. The Great American Bash drew $57,000, so that was like less than 5,000 people in the Boston Garden. And it's this long six-man where they give us some spots, right? And then, of course, I'm a spare prick over here because they got no manager. It's a six-man, all three of them in the ring. And then they get the heat on Bobby. Bobby sells, and they beat shit out of Bobby, Then they give Stan the hot tag. He makes a comeback, which they moderately sell for, and then they fucking beat us. And then, while Stan's selling and Bobby's still kind of selling and Doc's checking on him and I'm starting to get in the ring, they decide they're going to get some more heat. We don't even know it's coming, and they jump us afterwards. And Dr. Death decided he fucking had enough. Good. So he goes out and grabs one of those old wooden chairs that they had in the Boston Garden, right? And he starts advancing on Jimmy Garvin. 5'10", 205-pound Jimmy Garvin on vitamins. And here comes Dr. Death with a chair, and Garvin will not fucking retreat. So Doc hauls that chair back over his head. I can still hear the sound. And he fucking swung, and Jimmy Garvin sees it coming and puts his arms up. Whack! And Jimmy Garvin goes, fuck! And Doc says, fuck with me! Whack! Fuck! Fuck with me! Whack! Fuck! Fuck with... As Jimmy is retreating, and Doc is beating him over the head and arms with this, and pieces of the chair that are not gimmicked are fucking flying, and goddamn Dr. Death, and then me and Bobby and Stan said, fuck, we're following our guy, right? And we're behind him, and he chased him out of the building. Terry Gordy was the only one in the whole match that sold half-ass reasonably well. And he's the only one that shouldn't have.
Any conversation in the locker room?
Yes, I'm about to get to it.
I bet you are.
The locker rooms were separate at that point. We hadn't dressed with them, but we went right on through to the fucking heel side, because now I'm figuring, well, fuck, this is going to be interesting, because Terry's on the other side and Doc's on our side, and we'll see what the fuck. Bobby and Stan versus Michael and Jimmy would have probably been, I would give the edge to Bobby and Stan. But Jimmy, all of a sudden, Michael was trying to recreate the Freebirds of 10 years before at that point. And Michael was always a great wrestling personality and a great promo, and the reason why Buddy Roberts became a Freebird was because Michael's work was always the shits. And Bill Watts made Buddy a Freebird so it could be Buddy and Terry with Michael doing the talking, so he was de facto the world's largest wrestling manager, you know. But Michael thought that he was going to get power, and he might have even been on the booking committee for a brief time, but he thought that they were going to be the top heel team and recreate the glory period of 10 years before with the Freebirds. And Jimmy Garvin, who had always been a friend of ours, we'd always had a great relationship with, got on supplements, because he's fucking, what, 5'10", 205, and he was trying to work like a badass. And once again, they didn't want to fucking sell. Now we're baby faces, we're working with another team that don't want to fucking sell. Jimmy Garvin don't want to fucking... I was bigger than Jimmy Garvin, right? As a matter of fact, one time, I'm in the ring with something that's happened. The Freebirds do a run-in. Jimmy runs at me, and he throws a punch. And he didn't potato me with the punch, but he came charging to where he body-checked me, so I fell down without, you know, having to take a bump. But I still would take a bump and rolled out of the ring and sold while all the shit was cleared out. And babyfaces, Dr. Death came in, saved, blah, blah, blah. And I get up, and I'm holding my head, and I limp, and I put my arm around somebody, and I walk to the back.
Is it 100 degrees inside the
More. Literally, the walls were dripping with condensation, and that's also where some drunk fucking fan, while I'm doing the introduction of the Midnight Express, tries to jump in the ring over the top rope. And just, I'm looking at the camera. We're on live television, and this fan just jumps over the top rope and falls and lands in the ring. And I made some comment about him, and the security drug him out. But it was that kind of crowd. And we were baby faces, so I wasn't worried. And, you know, I told a story. Michael Hayes had teamed up with Jimmy Garvin. Terry Gordy was willing to work dates in between his Japanese commitments, but they needed full-time Freebirds. And this was a big disappointment to me personally, because Jimmy Garvin had been around for a few years at that point, and not only he and Precious were on the road, and he was cheap like me and the Midnight were, so sometimes we'd fly into Atlanta for TV on Crockett's plane. We would all five get a mid-size rental car and pile in just to go to TV and back to save, you know, having to ride in a cab, and we could go where we wanted and everything and save money. And I'd had pizza in their hotel room, and my wife at the time was friends with their nanny because they had kids, and when they'd go on the road, they left a nanny with them.
Was Hunter always the first choice, since he was scheduled to win in '96?
I was about to say he was the first choice for '96. He was only a year late.
Well, I was going to say, with the curtain call incident precluded that from happening. So
yeah, I think, yeah, because, and once again, just in case everybody doesn't know, in 1996 they thought Hunter Hearst Helmsley is the hot young rookie we've got. We want to elevate him. The King of the Ring winner usually gets elevated. There was that Mabel incident, but you know. So he's going to win in '96 when, of course, and the story's been told many times, when Hall and Nash were leaving in April of '96, and they ran around with Helmsley and Michaels, and they thought that they were just, oh golly, going to rule the wrestling business, which they actually pretty much ended up doing. So they're actually the smart ones, even though they're assholes, and the fucking people that let them do it are the goddamn goofs. But anyway, they went out and had a curtain call after they finished their respective matches, which was this card. Then they all go out and hug, baby faces and heels. Fans, there's no internet. People don't know they're leaving. They don't know what's going on behind the scenes. They just felt that they needed to hug. And Jerry Briscoe was hot and wanted to stretch people, and I was throwing my fucking shit around and trying to find Vince's limo so we could get the fuck out of there, because I was trapped with them, of course, because I came in the limo, so I had to fucking stay there till the bitter end. And it was just bullshit. They took a shit, whether you like Vince McMahon or not. Madison Square Garden was his building at the time. It was his father's building. He viewed that as his house. And they went out and took a shit on the business. in Vince's fucking dining room, right on his table. And he couldn't do anything to Diesel or Razor because that was their last night. And he couldn't do anything to Michaels because he was dumb enough to let a fucking immature jack off like that have his goddamn belt, say he's going to punish the world champion who has already shown a predilection for fucking losing his smile and going home. So Hunter Hearst Helmsley got spanked. He didn't win the King of the Ring. It cost him about $150,000 or $200,000 that year. He's probably since made it back. And he was forced to go, or told to, not forced to, nobody held a gun to his head. He was told to go around to all the boys and apologize for what he did. And he should have. And everybody thinks, oh, it's goddamn, as quaint as it seems to look back now. No, he took a shit on the fucking business. He exposed the fucking business. Vince McMahon had done it, but it was his fucking business. There was no reason for the boys, for their own self-serving fucking motivation, to go out there and do that. There was no storyline purpose to it. It didn't sell any tickets, didn't do anything for business, did something for their egos. Well, anyway, Helmsley goes around to every single member of the crew and apologizes. He realizes what he did was wrong, and he shouldn't have done it. And I even told him, I said, just suffer under it because the heat will pass. You're still young, you're still talented, but you did the wrong thing. At least you apologize, and now, just mind your own business and everybody will forget about it and blah, blah, blah. And of course, about a year and a half later with Vince Russo, who doesn't respect the business any more than they did, running fucking things, then they show the home video clip on Raw of the incident and make a story out of it, and Helmsley reveals all along, which I figured that he wasn't genuine when he was apologizing. He just did it because he was told to and it was political, and he really knew that he was doing something to revolutionize the business. And then Russo brought that out all the more. Have you noticed people who revolutionize the business tend to revolutionize businesses that don't need revolutionizing that bad? And just, anyway.
Nash has claimed, and I heard it, that Vince okayed the curtain call. Do you believe this?
We all saw it. They walked right past Vince, and he was like, with the look on his face, why would he work Jim Ross? Why would he work Jerry Briscoe? Why would he work Bruce Pritchard? If he was going to work me, why would he work me? I was on his creative team. Why would he have worked any of those people before we were doing shoot promos? I think probably they've probably said something half-ass to Vince, and yeah, sure, pal, whatever, and okay, now it's okayed, or whatever, if that. He didn't know what was happening, and they didn't do anything about it for a year and a half, except spank, with two guys that are leaving, and he spanked one of them that was staying. So why would he have known about it ahead of time?
No, but it was Ian, in all seriously. The USWA was gone, and the global deal was getting ready to kick in, and I've done everything. I
was a part of that.
I'd done everything. I'd done everything, and it was time for me to go. And this was December of 1990, and I asked Rick Rude, I called and told him that I was going back home to Mobile and going back to the funeral business, and that was it. I'm still stealing from part two. Make a long story short, Rick said, don't do that. I'll get back with you. And he called me back and gave me a phone number. He said, write this number down. I said, what is it? It's Vince's home number. And the rest is history. I went up there the next day. Walt came back with a contract, and
it was such perfect timing. Not trying to steal from part two, but it was such perfect timing.
We're going to steal from everybody.
We're going to steal from everybody.
It don't matter.
Eddie, if you steal from one person, it's plagiarism. From many people, it's research. They come up with the greatest gimmick of modern times, an Undertaker that needs a pallbearer and you show up a licensed mortician. That was Providence, fate, whatever.
I just did a reunion a few days ago with J.J. Dillon, and I got to sit next to him. The week before that, I got to sit next to Bobby Heenan all afternoon. This time, I got to sit next to J.J.
When did you first start booking, Mr. Cornette?
Oh my God, that's Flair's fault.
No, it's not my fault. Everybody knows that it took me 13 years to get out of high school, okay? I'm the first to admit it, right?
Fifth year senior.
So the only reason I took the job in the booking committee was just to find a place to hide because, brother, they weren't taking care of me. But I surrounded myself with people that were smart. Never going to say, I was a hell of a hand in the ring, but I'm never going to tell everybody I was a genius. But I got Shorty, I got Jim Cornette, and And I conned Mike Graham, who was really smart at one time. I don't know how Dundee ended up there. That was a joke. But, sorry. Greg Gagne. I'm sorry, but I mean.
Don't sugarcoat it, Rick. But no, what happened was Rick got the book, and also because already
Rick didn't get the book. Rick was hiding.
Well, Rick was.
If I was the booker, there never would have been ding-a-lings, okay?
Herd was starting to exert influence that was detrimental to business. So Rick said, "I'll have the book, please." And then he got me and Kevin Sullivan and et cetera. But I got to learn from Kevin how to do paperwork, and Rick, you shortchange yourself because you were the definition of what a good booker was. You set the direction. You knew from being an in-ring performer, this guy should work a program with this guy. They can get the most out of each other.
I just didn't. I never appreciated the heat that goes along with that job. Because you can't win. I mean, and then it's by committee. And Eric and I just did that because I was ducking and dodging. You know, I mean,
but you picked the right people to work against each other in programs. You had a tremendous eye for your own. You let me and Kevin do paperwork, and it worked, and it was the highest ratings and the best pay-per-view buy rates they had for the following 6 freaking years. So something was right.
I'm actually gonna, Jim. Thank you for reminding me of all that. I'd forgotten that. I'm going to send that on my resume to Vince for my 3rd Hall of Fame ring.
There you go. Hey, Ric Flair and Arn Anderson against it was Tully and Arn and the Rock and Roll did a 4.4 on the Sunday show, and you and Pillman did a 4.0 on the Saturday show in the same weekend. They'd been doing 2s 4 months before, and Herb still wouldn't leave you alone. Yeah.
Well, how about the time I go to him, because I was dying to work with him on a single anyway. I go, let me have Bobby Eaton. No, he don't mean nothing like Midnight Express. We go into Knoxville. Remember that?
Yeah.
We went to Knoxville.
Wasn't that a Clash of the Champions?
Clash of Champions.
Yeah.
Me and Bobby, man. We tore it down. We did a hell of a number on that.
But Herd said, why does Bobby Eaton get a title match? You drop him in out of a helicopter?
That was it, yeah. That was the line, yeah.
And remember the first one you did a DQ because you didn't want to beat Bobby. And that's when he was like, well, yeah, world champion can't even beat Bobby Eaton. So then you had to rematch, and I came up with a finishing pitch to you where you beat up Stan, knocked me out with my own racket, and then beat Bobby 1, 2, 3, and was standing there with all of our bodies laying in various places around the ring, and I said, is that a flat enough job for fucking Herd, right?
Yeah. No, I know, but I mean, the Herd that's never had that was a Jim I had forgotten. How did Bobby get it? Dropping out of a helicopter? I don't know. How did you get the Herd, you dumbass? And they bring you in a pizza truck and drop you in the back of the building at CNN Center? Jesus Christ, somebody rolled you in with the garbage and took you up the elevator chute to the office? I don't know. What a moron. Jesus. I tell everybody, the guy said, how did Jim Ross do it? I said, Jim Ross kept him drunk. The only time you could tolerate Herd is Jim just kept the scotch going down his neck.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is Jim Ross had more patience than the rest of us. We all just wanted to just choke him and be done with it. Yeah. JR would actually just placate him until he could get rid of him.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, Jim wrote it out, but Jim was smart, he was as impulsive. The guy could just push your buttons, man. It was incredible the things he said to you. But who knows?
Remember when, I hate to bring up detrimental things with Blackjack's current situation, but when Blackjack and his other son, Kendall, went to jail for a brief period of time in Florida, they called me because Kendall was working for us, and I happened to be somewhere where they could reach me. Rick and Kevin, everybody was on the road. I said, well, take Kendall off the cards because he's in jail, and put in so-and-so because he's not working, right? So it's an underneath match. That's a major decision I've just made. And the next booking meeting, Herd says, and I'm sick and tired of all these card changes. And he points his stubby finger at me. He says, I'm looking at you when I say that. I said, what are you talking about? Well, you just changed the cards. I said, the guy's in jail. What do you want me to do, bake him a cake with a file in it?
Yeah, I mean, he was oblivious to everything. God, I really don't care what he thinks of me. I guess I've made that pretty clear. But he made my life miserable, boy, I'll tell you. When I cut my hair and I walked through that airport, when I cut my hair and nobody recognized me, I wanted to kill myself. Then he wanted to put an earring in my ear. Remember, Jim?
Oh, yeah, Spartacus.
And call me Spartacus. Yeah, thanks, Jim.
So Jim, were you in that meeting when the earring is pitched? Do you remember what that sounded like?
No, that's actually, I had already quit the committee by then, so I was not in that meeting because the way
actually what happened is Herd asked you to leave the room. Jim was telling him off. He said, "You can't talk to me like that." And Cornette said, "You're right. I quit. Goodbye," and walked out the door.
Oh,
yeah, it wasn't
it was bad.
He didn't just resign casually, Jim, like that.
It was a production.
Yeah, Jim had his words, and then he walked out. I quit.
You quit the committee, not the promotion.
Not the promotion. They couldn't lose Jim Cornette in the Midnight Express.
No, I quit the committee in March. I quit the promotion. I believe in October.
What was the story there? How did that come about?
I always used to tell Bobby Eaton, this is how I want to give my notice to Jim Herd. I want to go in CNN Center. I want to go to his office. I want to shove the door open, and I want to fire 3 or 4 shots from a blank pistol at him, right? And so that was how I was going to quit, because I knew I was going to quit a long time before I did. And Bobby finally said to me, he said, "Corny," he said, "all the stupid things that he's done to so many people and as many people as hate him, he may have a real one in his top desk drawer and start shooting back."
Yeah.
I said, well, you may be right.
Yeah.
And so they gave me the opportunity to do that. They gave me the opportunity to work at the gorilla position. Now, for those of you that, a lot of you might know what the gorilla position is, and at the top of the ramp, there's a curtain. Right behind the curtain is this a control room, basically is what you would call it, where a stage manager, more or less, would sit there.
Monitor, headsets, right. You know, what's going on in the show. This is the last place to go before you go out.
Important job, because you were really the middleman between the ring, what was going on in the ring, and the production truck, as far as the timing and everything. And it was your job to time the show. You know, they would tell you after they had the thousands of meetings and tore up the thousands of scripts and over and over again, finally, 5 minutes before the show went on, it would be, "Percy, the show's going to go, whatever, let's say 58 minutes is out of the blue." You know, so I had 58 minutes, so I had to take the matches and go to each one of the matches. How much time do y'all need? My God.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure this crowd would do.
Yeah.
Now, how much can we have?
Yeah,
how much can we steal from somebody else?
They're either going to say 2 minutes or 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Never anything in between. They either want to get in and get out or stay forever.
And there were some that never went home when you told them to.
No.
Never. And some would go home early. But you have to understand, each second was worth so much money. It was so valuable. And editing time, or the live shows, it was really critical because you had to go off at that time. The tape shows was a little bit different, but you had to make sure.
What was the money like at that point, right as Crockett Sr. passed away? What was the money like for the opening match guys, for the main event guys, if you know or can recall? But
I can recall.
I figured
if
he
you
could.
Had to guess, because we have not prepared this in advance.
We have not prepared this. There is no collusion whatsoever.
In 1971, when I broke into the business after that phone call, what do you think my average was a week? 1971 now.
You came in underneath.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still assuming...
And there was no wrestling on Sundays.
There was no wrestling on Sundays. That limits it to 6 days, but I'm still assuming they had a decent minimum at that point. $300? $400?
Pretty good. My average the first year that I was there was $265 a week. And you were an independent contractor, paid your own expenses, and you would carpool and pay... whoever was driving to split the costs, and that would save you money. And then I hope nobody from the IRS is listening, but of course for tax...
Statute of limitations.
Thank goodness. For tax purposes, I would write down the mileage every night as if I drove every trip by myself, and that would help.
Shame on you. Yeah. All right. The IRS scandal, move over, Benghazi. J.J. Dillon cheated on his mileage.
But then again, my second year, and one of the great things about the business is that if you work hard, you can do better. And my second year in the business, I averaged like $360 a month, a week. So now and That's a big jump.
And that's, let's say, 3, 7, that's $1,500 a month in 1972.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that wasn't bad, but what about the Hawks and the Hansons and the top guys? Do you have any inkling of what they were at that point?
I have no idea.
But you would have to extrapolate just from your involvement in the business that if you were making $300 a week where you were, they were probably in $1,000 a week spots. Probably better in some cases.
I would say
that's 40 years ago. So what was 60 grand a year 40 years ago? Probably be the equivalent of 200 today. And people think big money in wrestling is a recent thing.
The one big difference, and I think needs to be pointed out, was, and you and I have similar backgrounds that we started as a fan, and half a century later, I'm still a fan. That's how I started. And so to travel the miles that you traveled, to take whatever physical risks were involved for $265 a week, and I don't know what the average salary was for the average working man, but I mean, $265 wasn't a lot. $265 a week wasn't a lot of money. You had to love what you were doing. Yeah. And that's the real big difference.
It took 24 hours of your day. Because you would leave the house, go to the town, come back just in time, maybe if you did come back home, to maybe eat something quick and go to bed, and then you'd get up the next day and you'd leave and do the same thing over again, day after day after day.
And here's the thing, you talk about running 3 towns a night. The furthest town away was Norfolk, which from Charlotte was 365 miles one way.
Yeah.
Now, if you weren't booked in Richmond the next day, which was 90 miles away, and you were booked at a spot show in South Carolina, and a lot of times it wasn't 3 and 4 guys, you would drive, if you told somebody today that you got in a car and drove 365 miles from Charlotte to Norfolk, waited in the dressing room because you had to be there ahead of time, wrestled your match, took a shower, got in the car, got a 6-pack of beer. It's not supposed to drink when you drive, but sometimes you have to stretch the laws.
Well, you've already cheated the government, so why not, you know.
And drive all the way home, they would look at you and say you had to be totally insane.
Oh, and one time in 1986, we got double Charleston. You remember the double Charleston, South Carolina, Charleston, West Virginia, back to back. So
Same story.
That was 560 miles in between. Yeah.
Yep.
The guys were, and I'll drop this right now just because we're talking about money. I had this discussion in Charlotte with Ole Anderson at the Fan Fest here a few months ago. He, in 1978, between wrestling as a main event talent in the Mid-Atlantic territory, wrestling as a main event talent in the Atlanta territory, and booking for Barnett at that period of time, which meant he got 2% or 3% of each town for booking. He made between $250,000 and $300,000 in 1978. We looked it up, people smarter than me that can do the computer thing, and that translates today to $750,000. So that's the kind of money that it was possible for a guy to pull in if he was smart enough to be either an owner or a booker or in the office or whatever, as well as a main event talent.
And not to interrupt you, but when we talk about Hall of Fame, I always felt that Ole Anderson was Hall of Fame worthy because he drew nothing but money. He was a very smart guy, and the feedback that I get, well, yeah, but he didn't wrestle that many places.
He didn't travel.
Why
would you?
Well,
why would you?
You answered the question.
He lives in North Carolina with beautiful weather, or in Atlanta with beautiful weather, and he owns part of both promotion, or one promotion, and books for another promotion. He's making literally $750,000 in today's money. Why are you going to go to Kansas City?
And between Florida and Charlotte and back to Georgia, he didn't have to and take a few times off to go to.
And that was Lawler's gimmick.
Yes.
Jerry Lawler. People say, well, he never left Memphis. I don't mean to get off on a tangent here, but nobody's going to stop me. So I saw his check one time when I just started in the business. He's handing out the checks, and his is laying there and I couldn't help because it was not in an envelope, and it was for $3,952, right? Yeah. I said, Jerry, was that for last week? He said, that was for last Monday. He had 10% of Memphis.
But he
drew $39,000.
But he also earned it.
Because he drew $39,000.
Absolutely.
I'm going to win a bet.
Who is she anyway?
She's the cleaning lady. Just came into my phone.
Well, get your broom, girl.
Yeah. It's sunny.
Please, we're on.
As a matter of fact,
we're on good terms.
She just moonlights at Ring of Honor. She's actually the full-time jizz mopper down at the Porno Theater. So
jizz mopper.
Yeah.
What is that?
Well, she cleans up the
she just threw it right at you. Smell it. Does it smell like bleach?
Wait a minute.
Oh Lord. How? Oh.
Smells familiar, but I can't quite put my finger on it.
I heard you was a freak.
Yeah, and you know, and it's funny, Bobby Fulton of the Fantastics. One time we were having a match, gosh, I guess it was for an Atlanta TV taping, WCW taping, and some way or another, he and Bobby Eaton got screwed up on a spot coming off the turnbuckles, and Bobby Eaton landed on his head. Landed on Bobby Fulton's head, that is. And come back in the locker room, and Bobby Fulton went up and thanked Bobby Eaton, said thank you. And Bobby said, for what? He said, well, really, he said, I haven't been able to hear out of that ear in the past couple of years. And some bitch, when you landed on my head, my hearing popped back in.
Was he shooting?
He was shooting.
Dykins from OnlineWorldWrestling.com. Do you have any specific memories of Hercules Hernandez when he was your bodyguard protecting you from Hacksaw Duggan?
Hercules Hernandez was a great guy. And what's the funniest? I can tell he saved my life in Houston. We'd done a deal where I got my head shaved, right? And so I was wearing a mask. And at the end of every match that I would manage Herc against Hacksaw Duggan, Duggan would somehow pop my mask off so people would see me with bald hair, and then we'd grab the mask back and run off. Well, as I grabbed the mask and we're running down the aisle, some fan snatches it and takes off down like the fourth row ringside. And I lost my head because I'm thinking, it's my only mask. And I've run and I catch the guy, grab him, I kick him in the balls and snatch the mask back, and I look around, I am in the middle of ringside. And I see knives coming out and people are tying hangman's nooses and pulling out. You know, it looked that way. Actually, they were going to beat the shit out of me. All of a sudden, here comes a guy over my head, and here's Hercules, and grabbed me up under his arm, and with one hand was carrying me, and with the other hand was pie-facing fans till we got out of ringside. Or another time, he and Dr. Death were a heel tag team in Houma, Louisiana. They beat up ringside. Everybody. As the people, for some reason, the people came in formation, like synchronized swimming or something. As we're going down the aisleway, they came in reverse order. The people that were on the end of the first row started, then the second row, then the third row. So I've got Doc's football helmet, and I'm backing up behind Dr. Death and Hercules. And people are flying. And I'm just, every time somebody kind of peeks through, bip, with the football helmet, and we get back to the locker room. They've threw 15 people out of the way. Doc and Herc beat up a bar in Alexandria one night. Pee Wee Anderson, the referee, jumps up on the bar and rips his shirt off and starts doing the Hulk Hogan pose while Doc and Herc beat up 12 guys. But my favorite Hercules Hernandez story, coming back from Jackson, Mississippi. It was probably, I guess it was November, so it got down to like freezing at night down there. So it's cold, and I'm driving by myself because I'd come from interviews that Midnight Express had come from somewhere else. So we're all headed back to Alexandria. And Herc lived in Alexandria too, and at the time his girlfriend, I can't remember her name, but she traveled with him, and also they had like 2 or 3 cats that traveled in the back seat. He had one of those old big, Lincoln or Cadillac, what big long car, you had to pay 2 parking meters. So anyway, I'm driving down the road, and all of a sudden I look up, and there's this big, long car, and the door, the driver door, is open, and it's driving down it wasn't even an emergency lane. This wasn't an interstate. It was just a fucking pull-off lane. And the door's not open like normal. It's open at a complete perpendicular 90-degree angle. And I was, what the fuck? And as I pull up, I roll down my window on that side. It's Herc and his girlfriend and the cats. Herc, is there a problem? What's going on? He says, oh, Jimmy pulls over. He says, Jimmy, he says, I needed to take a piss, so I stopped and started to get out, and a truck came along and whacked the door. He said, if I hadn't been holding on to it, it might have taken the whole thing off.
So he just continued to drive?
He just drove that way, yeah. Whether it was 1 o'clock in the morning in the middle of Mississippi, what are you going to do? But just the fact that he was holding on to the door, and that's the best the truck could do, to me indicate that was Herc. Well, another story. Did I tell this story on the last one? Maybe not. Herc's doing a run-in in Baton Rouge at Centroplex, and me and Crusher Darso, Khrushchev, Barry Darso, Demolition, whichever name, are standing back watching. It's Butch Reed and somebody. Herc's going to run in and attack the babyface. And as he gets down the aisleway, it's always happened at the ringside aisleway. He gets almost to the barricade to jump over, and some guy comes out and tackles him around the waist to keep him from going in and hurting the babyface. So he just went like that, into the ring. The cops bring the guy back, and they sit him in a chair. So me and Darso are here looking out the door, and it's a 2-swinging door thing in Centerplex. And over there, the one plainclothes cop is sitting with the guy who now realizes he's going to be arrested. And Darso just looked at him and said, I'd hit you, but I can't possibly hit you as hard as he's going to hit you when he comes back here. And sure enough, as soon as Herc was done, he comes in, he busts through those swinging doors like John Wayne going into the saloon. And the guy stood up about to say, I'm sure sorry, or whatever the fuck he was going to say. And Herc open-handed slap. Came around like this, caught him right up under there. I saw the guy's feet leave the ground. He was this far from the wall, his head flies into the concrete wall, smack, and then he dropped, smack. So it was like smack, 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 boom, and he's laying there like that, and he's done. One slap. So now the bell's ringing, me and the Midnight Express got to go wrestle. So we step over the fucking guy, go to the ring, have a 20-minute match, come back. The guy's laying in the exact same position. The cops are standing around him, and you hear the ambulance siren. Right? They're coming to pick him up and cart him out. I go to Herc. I said, Herc, why did you just slap him if you were that mad? He said, oh, Jimmy, hit somebody with your fist, you could hurt him. Speaking of ballless, gutless pricks, Vince Russo. Hello, Vince. The ballless, gutless prick. Do you know how he quit the WWF? Do you know that story? He was running a video store before Vince let him write for the magazine.
And he did John Arezzi.
And he did John Arezzi's radio show, and then they split up because Vince wanted to work with Vince, and too many Vinces. Russo wanted to work with McMahon, and Arezzi didn't, and Arezzi's weird in his own way, and whatever that fucking deal was. But
actually, Vince Russo wrote me off for money, so.
Well, as I'm sure he did, because he's a goddamn crooked, heinous piece of shit human being. Russo, all of a sudden now he's writing for the magazine. He can't spell. He can't write. He can't speak English. He don't get in the Brooklyn or the Bronx or whatever the fuck. But I'm looking at the guy's pad. He can't spell. Okay. It's not like he's a goddamn Rhodes Scholar, and I'm a spelling freak because language is, and I say fuck a lot, but it's language. So does George Carlin. I just saw him in the Poconos. He says fuck all the time. Anyway, so he's writing for the magazine, and then he insinuates himself. He has good ideas, and he has good ideas at a time when they need good ideas. And I'm not saying he's never had any good ideas, but you know what the problem is? The problem is all the good ideas he's ever had was from watching the goddamn cheap-ass B-movies that he used to rent in his goddamn loser video store. He doesn't know anything about wrestling. That's why when you hear ding, 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 immediately followed 60 seconds later by ding, 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 keep the match as short as possible, because when that bell rings, Vince Russo is lost. Vince Russo is a babe in the woods. Vince Russo is a deer caught in the headlights as long as there's a wrestling match going on. As long as he can make it a phony B-movie script or some goddamn an outhouse in the ring or women having miscarriages or something in some kind of bad taste that appeals to his New York bullshit attitude. That's what Vince Russo wants to do. So get the wrestling matches out of it, because nobody wants to see that shit anyway. That's been proven in WCW, where they don't have wrestling matches anymore because all the guys are doing it. I watched Thunder the other night because I happened to be stuck in a hotel room. I saw Lance Storm falling around like a drunk man. When you can make that guy uncoordinated, you can do it to anybody. So the point is, Russo insinuates himself in, and then all of a sudden Russo discovers the one true talent that he has. Vince Russo discovers his calling in life. Vince Russo's one true talent is to believably lie and say that he's qualified to do something when he's not. Vince Russo then disregards the fact that he had a network quality television production facility making his meaningless jabble sound like it actually meant something. The best announcer in the business, Jim Ross, to explain it, who he tried desperately with every ounce of energy in his body to keep off television, that he was too Southern, that he was afflicted, that he had Bell's palsy, that people didn't want to look at him. And every time Jarrett walked down the ramp, he'd get a standing ovation from the people who respected what he fucking did because he was good. And they will never respect Vince Russo because he got buggy whip arms and fucking big fucking eyes, and goddamn, he looks like a goof because he is a goof, because he fucking walks out there like he's goddamn King Kong to the Road Warrior music.
And he thinks he's over because he goes to Long Island and he's his triumphant return like he's Luke Gehrig at the fucking stadium. And everybody goes, who's this fucking buggy whip-armed motherfucker? He couldn't stand that JR was over because he didn't like Southern people. He didn't like Bell's palsy people. I don't know. Maybe he don't like handicapped people. I don't know. He didn't like JR because JR would tell him when he was full of shit. And so would I. And he didn't like me either because I'm wanting to do wrestling. Well, goddamn, it's the World Wrestling Federation. Why don't we put a little wrestling in there, Vince, Russo, every once in a while? What do you want to do? Fucking Holiday on Ice with chimpanzees? As a matter of fact, I'll probably give him his next pay-per-view. So then, he slowly plays to the internet fans. Because, see, Russo, since he probably has a small penis, and since he knows that he doesn't know what the fuck he's doing, has to have positive feedback and reinforcement to make his ego grow. So he doesn't want to sell the buildings out. He doesn't want to fucking have a great television show. He doesn't want to produce a product he can be proud of. Wow, that was a classic match between two excellent athletes or fucking great performers. He wants to do fucking mud wrestling with silicone-titted bimbos because he's sexually frustrated, and he wants the internet fans to think he's great because they're the ones that he can listen to. Because the other fans, the ones that pay all the money for all the tickets, they're cheering the stars. And guess what? He ain't a star. He's not on TV. He's a writer. Maybe he can fix that. Maybe, just maybe. Because the internet people are stroking him enough that the other marks, the ones running the fucking multi-million-dollar company in Atlanta, they don't know the fucking difference. He convinces them that he's responsible for Vince McMahon's success. Vince McMahon was a millionaire before he met Vince Russo. He had Stone Cold Steve Austin. He had The Rock. He had The Undertaker. He had the best announcer. He had the best television studio. He had the best office staff. They got the smartest secretaries, for God's sake. It's a well-oiled machine run by one individual who, Vince McMahon, in my opinion, of the greatest wrestling we've ever seen, is vastly different, and we know that. But you know what? I learned that there is something in his... I do not like that. I do not like that style of wrestling, but I learned there's something in Vince McMahon's favorite statement. Chocolate, vanilla. Which one is the best? Okay, can I be mad at you for liking chocolate? I don't want to see that. I don't want that fucking chocolate near me. But if you like the fucking chocolate, eat the goddamn chocolate. As long as I can have my vanilla. So I got my vanilla now, and he's got his chocolate. Okay, I can deal with that. But, point being, Vince Russo didn't engineer that success. Vince Russo was a small part. The proof that isn't in the pudding is the fact that now he convinces the marks in Atlanta, well, I saved the WWF, so now you can give me a lot of money. What did I say when he left? I said, he's going to take their money till they send him home, and then they'll probably pay him anyway because they always do, and then he'll be out of the business in 2 years. What's he saying now? I'm going to be out of the business anyway. Because he knows. He raped the business for a bunch of fucking money. So anyway, here's how he quit. Vince McMahon goes to England for a pay-per-view. Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara, who's another fucking real winner, who made fun of Jim Ross's Bell's palsy that almost ended his career. Ed Ferrara's a goddamn piece of fucking shit, in my opinion. Ed Ferrara was the one who defended the fucking deal where Marlena, Terry, got knocked off the fucking ring and had a miscarriage. And I went up to him, I said, let me ask you a question. How did that add a rating point? How did that sell a ticket? How did that do anything but make a lot of people in the audience, probably out there live, and certainly some at home, uncomfortable because it's happened to them? And if it happened to my girlfriend, I would come up if I knew you were the one and punch you in the fucking face for doing that. Well, they do it on Dallas. Ed, this is wrestling. It's neither fish nor fowl. They don't look at it like that. Sure, they may know it's fixed, predetermined, phony, staged, whatever you may say, but they still don't look at it like it's a genuine acting performance. But on the other side of the coin, you can't defend it either way, because if it was real, it's a horrible thing to happen. If it's fake, and she was just acting like she had a miscarriage, why? Because it doesn't serve any purpose. I said, basically, it's just bad taste, and it doesn't add anything, and it would make me real fucking mad if it was my girlfriend that it really happened to, that she got a fucking flashback and went in the bathroom crying, and I want to know who's responsible, and it's you pudgy little fat bastard, and I'll fucking choke you. I don't think I said fat bastard, but, you know, if I'd have been around when he did the JR thing, I would have punched him. I wouldn't even said fat bastard. I would have hit him in his fucking face, just because that's bullshit. So anyway, Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara, who are now butt buddies, who are joined at the hip, after they never even met each other until Ferrara was brought in from California somewhere because he once wrote Duckman. I don't fucking know. Maybe he once fucked Duckman. Maybe he once was Duckman. Anyway, they went till Vince goes to pay-per-view in England. I know I'm drawing this out, but fuck these fucking guys. And they fly to Atlanta and make the deal because, see, they're office employees. And one mistake Vince made was counting on some degree of loyalty, honesty, or at least fucking human kindness from guys that he's made a lot of money from. They go to Atlanta, they sign the contracts. They fly back to Connecticut, where they both live now. Vince Russo has a house in Trumbull or whatever the fuck it is. Vince McMahon comes back the following day, straight into the Meadowlands for TV. Meadowlands, Trumbull, Connecticut, 60 miles. Even in New York traffic, I would have done it. Vince Russo didn't have the balls, didn't have the guts, didn't have the decency, didn't have the common courtesy to get his fucking ass in that car and drive to the Meadowlands and walk up to Vince McMahon and say, Vince, they offered me so much fucking money that I couldn't turn them down, and I appreciate it. It's been fun. Here's a hearty handshake. He called him on the fucking phone. Vince McMahon gets a phone call at whatever time of day. Oh, by the way, your head writer is not only not coming to your national television tonight, but he just took a job with your competitor. Fuck you, Vince Russo. You're a goddamn ballless fucking prick. And he was so underappreciated. He wasn't given the credit that he was, that he deserved, that he was responsible for. Nobody recognized him. You know what they're recognizing now? They're recognizing what Vince Russo shit looks like when they didn't have Vince McMahon standing over him saying, you know what? Those 24 ideas are real bullshit, but I'll take this good one. You got a bunch of fucking dancing bears parading around in the goddamn ring, a bunch of women with silicone, a bunch of goddamn club-footed, slap-happy fucking guys that couldn't work their way out of a goddamn paper bag, and he don't know the fucking difference. And he's out there beating Ric Flair up with a baseball bat because he finally got to be a star. Now he don't have to subsist on the internet marks fucking clapping for him. He can have the fucking roar of their dwindling crowds going, oh, that's, that Russo guy. He's a star now. He beats the wrestlers. He's a fucking prick. He has no respect for the business or the people in it. He made the statement, well, we'll just teach actors to wrestle, because if I can learn to work in the ring, anybody can. There's a goddamn news bulletin I didn't hear about when I heard about World War II and all the other great happenings last 50 years. When did Vince Russo learn to fucking work? Jesus fucking Christ. I want to puke.
What exactly happened with you leaving a message on his voice machine or something like that?
Oh, that's another good one here, and this proves what a liar he is in addition to all his other fine qualities as a human being. I hope he sues me. As a matter of fact, Vince Russo, if you ever see this, sue my fucking ass and suck my dick while you're at it. You know what? I did make the comment to somebody, and I won't bury them by saying who, because they probably should have reported it. I said, because I was coming to Louisville last year, one way or the other, I sincerely wanted, and I will tell you the wonderful story of my relationship with Danny Davis and how I'm tremendously gratified with what I'm doing now with OVW in a little while. But I was coming home because I started being in Connecticut, and I was coming home. And I made the remark, Russo has cut my balls off here since day one, because I know that Vince McMahon has been good to me. And like I said, chocolate and vanilla wrestling, at least he's been honest, and he's not lied to me, and he's not cheated me, and he's not fucking cut my balls off behind my back, blah, blah, blah. Vince McMahon's one fault maybe is that when somebody tells him some things, he believes them too earnestly, or he believes in their loyalty or their honesty too earnestly, because otherwise he wouldn't let a fucking prick like Russo run around. But there's Russo ignoring his kids' Little League games to sit in Vince's outer office to suck up to him. And it wasn't because he wanted to fucking play Sir Walter Raleigh and throw himself down over the mud puddle. It was because he wanted to cut everybody else's nuts off so that he could get the fucking spots, so that he could cut everybody's nuts off, and then he'd be a star. But anyway, I was coming here and I made the remark, if I go home without this developmental program working out like I wanted and I don't have a check, I think I'm just going to hospitalize that fucking Russo my last day here, just because I just goddamn want to. Because he's been cutting my nuts off behind my back, just like he did to Jim Ross, just like he did to a lot of people, and he didn't have the fucking guts to say anything to their foul. He'd argue with me to my face. But the problem is, I wasn't arguing with him because I didn't like him. I didn't like him at that point. There was a time we could ride together. That is no more. But I was arguing with him because I genuinely felt that it was better for business or for the company or for the talent involved that we not do stupid asinine things with them and make them turn into, buffoons and jokes. So anyway, the answering machine. More people who shall not be named, but who used to be friends with Vince Russo until he moved under cover of darkness out of Connecticut after giving no notice and just fucking leaving and going to the competitor. Well, the people he used to talk to every day, people he's supposed to be friends with, now they don't hear from him. They don't hear from his wife. Their wives don't hear from his wife, but they're just gone. They vapor. But as the WWF was going to be in Atlanta, maybe Russo thought he was going to run into somebody. Maybe he had a sudden flash of humanity or conscience. I doubt that. Whatever, he left a message on one of their voicemails. Give me a call. When you're in town or whatever. And that person happened to be riding in the car with me. And that person happened to work for the WWF. And I happened to say to that person, I wish I had that motherfucker's number, because there's some things I never really got a chance to say to him before I left. Well, here's his number. Okay. Here you go. Must have been his cell phone. Because he answered. It was like 11 o'clock at night. It wasn't 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm driving in the car. Hello? I recognize that voice anywhere. I said, Vince Russo. He said, yeah. Jim Cornette. He said, hey. I said, I just want, and this was after he got sent home the first time. I said, I just want to call you up and congratulate you, you fucking piece of shit, on getting canned, getting your ass fired, getting sent home for being incompetent, you fucking piece of shit. You cut my goddamn nuts off long enough to everybody that you could and try to get me fired long enough. So how does it feel to know that they finally fucking found out that you goddamn don't know what you're fucking doing? Fuck you. And then I said, and if you'd like my fucking home phone number, since I'm on a cell phone, break it up where we can continue this, and I started to give it to him, I realized he'd already hung up. Well, okay, that's his privilege. It's also my privilege, since I still possess that phone number, to call it the next day. Because I still had some things I hadn't said to him. And that day his voicemail picked up that time, and I said, you know, by the way, I'd just like to remind you also that you are the shits, and you're a goddamn piece of shit. You're a liar. Just directed at him. I can't remember what it was, but it was actually one of the better Jim Cornette tirades directed at him, at Vince Russo, at the human slimeball himself. He calls the WWF Human Resources Department that's supposed to handle shit like, don't call each other names. I don't know what the fuck they do. I'm wrestling. I'm not human resources. He told them that I had threatened his children, that I said I wanted to fuck his wife. I'm sorry, I've seen Amy. She's a saint to live with the piece of shit, but I wouldn't, no, I'm not romantically interested. I didn't say anything about his kids. His kids are actually some fucking misbehaving Halloween fucking kids. I'm over at Bruce Pritchard's house one time. He had a little cookout, had some ribs. He said, try my hammock. I said, I sure will. I'm laying in a hammock, it's peaceful under the tree. These little fucking pricks shot me with one of those goddamn water machine guns hooked up to a garden hose. I hate kids anyway, truth be honest. Most of them, because they're all, misbehaving. But anyway, so his kids are unruly kids, but I didn't say anything about his kids. His kids never did anything wrong to me besides shoot me with a water gun. I'll forgive that. His wife's never done anything to me. I was talking to him because he's the piece of shit that's fucked me around. So he calls him up and says that and tries to get the guy that gave me the number in trouble because even though he doesn't work there, he still wants to fuck with everybody else. So Russo's just a piece of shit on a number of levels. He's devalued and destroyed a large part of the credibility of the wrestling business. Every time people turn on that Thunder and that Nitro and that senseless, it looks like they edited in a mix master, and the performances are horrible, and they can take talent and make it no talent. Like I said, you get Lance Storm in a match, he's stumbling around like a drunk man. Lance Storm, one of the most graceful people I've seen this side of Nureyev. What does that say for they can't book a match. They don't know what a match is. They've never had one. They think they've had them. They've actually had stumble, fumble, and fall matches. So anyway, that's just brief little snippets of how I feel about Vince Russo. I could go on in detail, but you probably